Good morning, everyone, and a pleasant morning as it is. Getting a bit of sun coming through, which is nice. So it's not as bad, it's not as basically hazy and dull as can be sometimes down here in Tassie. Anyway, let's get going. Gary, quick question. Will metabolic water produced from fat oxidation directly replace deuterium in mitochondria? Jeez. The actual pool of water, the metabolic water that's produced in the Krebs cycle, which is in the matrix of the mitochondria, there are enzymes there that will swap out deuterium, because even fat has some deuterium. Everything has deuterium. Fat, sugar's got more. Fat sources from seed oils that are, put through a manufacturing facility tend to actually have an increased in isotopes of deuterium. So it depends on the amounts, and then there are enzymes that basically just replace those. It's a rate limiting. There's only a certain rate. If you exceed a certain rate, and I can't remember exactly what the rate is in terms of the flow. Yep, anyway, I just can't remember it. And so that then will be a problem. If you stick to a deuterium level of 130 parts per million on average or below, your body will be able to replace those isotopes of deuterium with isotopes of hydrogen which do not have a neutron. And as long as we don't get into that metabolic water a whole lot of neutrons, then we'll only have protons going through the ATP synthase and producing energy. So, yes. Anyway, hope you got your earlier, I think, I haven't seen the Bart's things yet, but I suspect it was all on, it's chemical energy. It's not heat. Yes. So, yes, I know that Ted would love to put certain people on the YouTubia in bomb calorimeters and just demonstrate to them that it's heat. Nothing to do with chemical energy. So, anyway, thought I'd throw that in for a laugh. Yeah, but yeah, basically, your metabolic water production happens through the Krebs cycle, and which is in the matrix, which is that inner part. So that's where it all happens. And if you depends on the type of substrates that are coming in at the different levels, and I've talked about them before. Lard has far less isotopes of deuterium compared to others. But obviously, let's say you already have in the mitochondria, inside your body, a certain threshold of pre-existing deuterium, so to speak. Obviously, if you consume more animal fats that are low in deuterium, you will be able to displace a sort of a displacement over time as your body shifts from, because it will get rid of the excess deuterium. It just takes time, and then you will heal over time with that additional energy. Melatonin, good sleep, will also help heal and repair the mitochondria. So that's important. So we think about that it's only involved in sleep. No, it's also involved in actually repairing the electron chains so that have been damaged from too much deuterium. Hope that's clear in that regard. Anyway, obviously, when protons come through, they come through back into the actual water pool, which is within the matrix. So Anyway, so where am I now? Oops. This is shifting again. Why is it doing that? My StreamYard bar is going all over the place. G'day, Deborah. Lukey, how are you, mate? Ice cream, it's Chronicles that continue. HD, you got no patience, mate. You got no patience. You need a bit more taurine to relax, soothe, increase GABA, you know. Kumbaya. Tracy, good to see you, my dear. Lovely lady. And what sort of mischief have you been up to as well? Did that Ted character come across the pond to visit in your dreams? G'day, Ryan. Hi, Harry. Do you think that 1 gram per pound of protein is sufficient for strength training males? Yeah, it's what I consider the bare. The depends. Look, for the general population, yes, which is basically 2.2 grams per kilo. Yep, I'm absolutely fine. If with those, I sort of tend to go for I tend to basically consider a bit higher than that if you're trying to really build a lot of muscularity, like 3 grams per, you know, which 3 or 4 grams, which is sort of double that. So you're looking at 1.5 grams per pound or 2 grams per pound. So it really depends what are your goals, Ryan? You know, are you trying to really beef up? And obviously, whenever you actually do put in protein from animal sources, you want to amplify the leucine with taurine. So always consider that. And remember, in order to get taurine to basically diffuse throughout the whole body, you sort of, if you're really, really young, it's probably about, you could probably do it an hour prior to any strength exercises. But I tend to say to people somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half to get enough taurine in the system diffused to basically amplify the effects. You've got the myostatin inhibition, but also there is the amino transporting effect, which is also important. So it's not only the myostatin inhibition, but it's also in shuttling in, transporting more protein, and sort of magnifying the leucine muscle protein synthesis effect. So how we understand it from experiments. They are animal-based, but still, you know, mammalian tissue is mammalian tissue. We're not talking about the nutritional species appropriation nutrients here. We're just talking in general about how these things will react in a mammalian sort of model. Anyway, Pat, hello as well. Phoenix compilation. Good to see you, mate. Hello, Kitty. Good to see you. What a sunny day in the island. Yeah, it is. As I said, well, as you said, that it's starting just becoming a bit overcast. But anyway, yes, hopefully it will last. Anyway, g'day, mate. Persec. Oops, the sun's gone. Yeah, you spoke too soon. Thoughts on exogenous ketones? Not required. If a person seems to be going backwards, fat gains 2.5 year. There could be a lot of factors, a lot of reasons. that could be happening, Tracy. So it's not, sometimes plateaus can happen for a number of reasons. It could be just a normal, just sort of adjustment. The body just adjusts, and you just need to be consistent without cheating, and the body then will go, even, I remember hearing Kelly Hogan, she basically had gone up a bit of weight initially and then, came down quite a bit. So the body does resist going to different set points. And so, once you're at a higher, sort of weight level, the body has a sort of an inherent sort of resistance in that sense. Because you have to remember that what are these things happen? We started from an ancestral base where we were just seasonally putting on, engaging the Randall cycle in a very small window frame of a couple of weeks, adding adipose tissue additional, because we're in an interglacial period. We no longer had the mega beast where we could actually acquire much higher levels of fat. And as a consequence, we were always fat adapted. We were always really highly tuned. So that was a very small amount of time. And we never built up massive amounts of adipose tissue. Adipose tissue itself can actually counteract, can actually generate sort of hormonal effects and all that. Most of our ancestors would have never been in that state. This is more of a recent phenomenon. And so as a consequence, our bodies function a bit differently. So it takes time to make those adjustments. And you've got to keep it clean. You really have to keep it clean. I know from my own, from cheating multiple times, you get stuck in plateaus. You really have to go extremely clean for some time. Bart had the same thing, coffee, other things were affecting his, but when he cleared all that sort of stuff, went 100%, did the priming, re-switched his body, things started happening even faster than they were actually expecting things to happen. And that will vary between people due to genetics or damage or many other things, mitochondrial insufficiency, dysfunction, so sometimes you have to heal the mitochondria before you can actually start losing more, because you may not have good efficiencies there. You usually know it, as I've said before, you know it, that when you take away all the other stuff and you reduce the protein levels down to about 20 odd %, you go up higher fat levels, and you don't seem to be basically being able to tap into that. You're not very fat adapted, and that could be for a lot of reasons, including mitochondrial damage. So there's a lot of these sort of variations. Now, could exogenous ketones help that? They will mask it on the one hand. You're still basically not, yes, you will be pushed into a more ketotic state in that regard, but it's artificial. If you're still driving high insulin for whatever reason, stress, even mold, if you're in a moldy home, it can actually drive up insulin. So, you need to fix that. So there's a lot of factors that can actually drive. That you're in a city where there's a lot of air pollution, like you get Shanghai, those sort of areas. Do people realize that air pollution actually will raise insulin as well? So there's a whole lot of factors. If you're, heavily exposed to certain things, so it's outside just the diet itself. Now, I know that you're not in an environment that's going to have those effects, but it can be other people as well. So it can be a more complex sort of picture in a sense. As I said, try going really clean. I mean, really clean, and see how you go. Drop me a line as well. You've been a strong supporter for a very long time, so I'll make an exception to the email rule for now for you. What are your thoughts about Brad Marshall's and the croissant diet? Is the reverse electron? I'm not sure. I think he talk? I'm not sure, but he talks about certain types of fats. It's legit that can people seem to lose weight in such a high fat plus carbs? What they're actually using is they're actually in a still primarily glycolytic state. That means they're actually using glucose as their prime fuel, these people. So they're in like a state of, you could say, like a low fat state. But because they're using certain types of fatty acids, which are primarily like stearic acid, palmitate, and stuff like that, which are primarily saturated, they tend to have this phenomenon called reverse electron transport. What they do is they bring about the biogenesis of more mitochondria. Well, as a young person, if you do that, you probably will get some better results. An older person, this probably wouldn't work because they've got far more derangements, far more older mitochondria, and so also less less lean body mass as well. So if you've got less lean body mass can actually take up energy and reduce the gradient of a Randall cycle effect, and so can mitigate some of this sort of stuff. Also, reverse electron transport of saturated fats can also have this effect. But the reality is when you're eating real food, you can't get it in that combination. Now, they try to go through a sort of like a dairy type approach where there are higher saturates and higher medium chain triglycerides, which tend to basically both cause reverse electron transport and also uncoupling of the mitochondria, and tend to have this effect. Others, it varies. A lot of people, it's not a sustainable way. It will, like the vegan diet, like a fruitarian diet, you can still lose weight, you can still uncouple mitochondria, but at the same time, you will end up with nutrient deficiencies. So it's not a viable long-term approach in that regard. I don't know enough about the actual diet itself, the way it's actually designed. I've just heard some general stuff from other people, and that he promotes less of the other no moofers or poofers and primarily saturates. I think that that's what the guy sort of promotes, but I'm not sure. I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong, but that's my understanding. So yeah, I don't think it's it's not a species appropriate diet. It is higher in deuterium, so in the long run, it will do damage to your mitochondria from the carbs. So I don't see it as a smart approach anyway. I mean, you can lose weight with any method. You can lose weight taking cyanide. You can lose weight. That's fat weight we're talking about here, which is the key thing. You can lose it by doing a lot of things. So, constant fasting. The guy that did 380, what was it? 86, I think, or 83 days. Angus from a Scottish guy. So there's plenty of ways of losing, fat weight, but some are healthier than others. So, and some are more species appropriate than others. And so, as a long-term approach, you have to take your lifestyle and dietary approach as a long-term approach. Short-term, there's a lot of techniques, a lot of ways of actually, playing around with the biochemistry of your body and the physiology, manipulating hormones in a certain way, and affecting, through reverse electron transport and other things like that in the mitochondria to get certain results. But obviously, they're not practical approaches or viable for long-term or healthy approaches in many cases. I hope that sort of gave you a bit of my view on it. Without I don't know his food pyramid, so to speak, or whether he has a food pyramid. I can officially use a chainsaw now. I'm happy about doing the first aid course today. Probably a wise move. Sounds good. She's a dangerous woman. Luke, good to see you, mate. Structured water, is it a myth? Sort of. There are properties where photons interacting with structured water seem to behave in a certain way. But, if you're drinking structured water also can have high deuterium, which can be detrimental to your mitochondria. So structured water doesn't necessarily mean it's low in deuterium. It can vary in deuterium levels depending on the source. It's sort of, from memory, they're using some sort of electromagnetic effect to basically change the way a photonic energy will affect it. But it's very unclear whether it has any real benefits or even potential, even detriments. We don't really know. A lot of people claim a lot of things, but when you look under the hood, it's just sort of anecdotes and a lot of speculation. So, and I've looked into it a bit, and I've never been able to find really good research that is convincing of any. So I think it's probably is a myth, but I'm not saying it is. It may still have some minuscule effects, which anecdotally people feel. Maybe it's the placebo effect. I don't know. We've never done like proper randomized control studies of structured water and on different dietary approaches and in lock-in sort of situations where you're locked in a lab to really know exactly, is it placebo or isn't it? With thousands of people. Until we do a study like that, we really don't know. It's just speculation. KL, how are you, mate? Hi, Ariel. Checked out your Boron video recently. Just wondering what brand you use to recommend. It's on iHerb. Let me see if I can find it. I'll have to go into my list of better sign in. Account lists. Okay. I've listed everything, so it's, they do have like your favorite list of things. And there it is. That's the one. So that's the one that, remember, do not, if you basically want to normalize some of this hormonal stuff, if they're really deranged, it's usually for 1 week, 12 milligrams, second week, 9, then 6, and on the 4th week, you go down to 3, and you do it for about a couple of months. So depending on people's sort of circumstance, I usually recommend about minimum 3 months, maximum 6 months at basically 3 milligrams, no more after that, because otherwise you'll induce a magnesium and potassium deficiency, or the signs of it. A low grade, but it will be noticeable in some people, not everyone, depends on the person. So, and that's the equivalent of 2 avocados, basically at 3 milligrams. So it's a reasonable sort of level. You could have some seafood and all that and potentially get similar stuff as well. So you don't necessarily have to do it supplemental, but this is a sort of like a blunt instrument. You bring it in as a blunt instrument and you normalize things. Now, if you have excess xenoestrogens, like a lot of exposures to other things in your environment, then you should consider choline supplementation to basically methylate away at least a gram or per day, so you can actually reduce that and normalize things. Jason, good to see you, mate. I've been catching up on the older videos. This is my first live chat. Previously, you did first half of what your protocol for heart condition, but I couldn't find the second half. Is it posted? No, I haven't actually done the second part. Yes, it's one thing that I should actually do. I did forget to do that. Anyway, I'll remind myself to do it. Anyway, fair call. I'm content to ride it out and hope it sorts itself out. Yes. I'm snorting on this. I just realized I haven't actually. There's too much dust on this damn thing on the spitter. I've just noticed I'm giving myself a bit of dusty sort of sinuses. Anyway, reacting. So if you see my doing a bit of that, it's due to I need to clean it because it's really, really dusty. Shit. Anyway. It was a steak and butter challenge that triggered the fat gains. Okay. Some of this is not for everyone, and people need to be coached to remember when you do this sort of stuff. G'day, Sammy, how are you, mate? It's good to have you here. I was just going to say to Tracy before I forget, sometimes it's good to be coached because there can be variations, there can be issues. Adek she's pretty good at that. She's been on my channel as well. Raymond as well. Sometimes it's good to hook up with, even if it's for a shorter period of time, getting a bit of coaching and getting a bit of deeper understanding of how they do it and stuff like that. And because there can be, like, Pim had a different effect, and then things started working for her a bit after, where Bart, it's just really quickly. So there are these sort of variations, and I do think that there is a bit of a difference between men and women, the way they seem to react. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I sort of have just a cursory understanding of some of the stuff that they do. I haven't really looked into it to be completely candid. I sort of approach it in the old bodybuilding way, sort of beef up and then do the cut. It's been my sort of approach. But everybody's got their ways. It seems to work for a lot of people, this priming and then cutting with their fasting approach. So slightly different than the traditional bodybuilding way, but yep. Did I? Okay. Maybe we will meet on a Zoom session and have a bit of a chat. I do need to set up a new one now, a new Zoom thing. That'll be a good thing. I should do that for next Saturday, because remember, I'm only doing fortnightly now, live streams. So probably next Saturday, and then I can sort of come in and out through the weekend next week. That'd be probably the best way of doing it. G'day, Shelley. Hello, everyone. Typing on a brand new iPad. Fair enough. Hope it's working for you very well and all being set up. G'day, iNature. Hello, Harry. Can you explain how agriculture changed heights of tribes? Well, it's if you reduce the amount of protein intake and taurine and leucine in the diet, you will affect height. You see it as a phenomenon. I mean, at the end of the day, we are flesh and bone. Our flesh and bone is made of animal fats and proteins. That's what it is. You furnish the body with less of that. The body is going to, over time, a number of generations will adapt. And that adaptation, it means people will get shorter. We saw that amongst the Indians of the subcontinent, the Chinese, the Japanese, and a number of other Southeast Asians, which adopted a more agriculturally based society and economy with less animal protein intake. So, it's pretty much you need protein. I mean, what is bone? Mineralized collagen. What's collagen? Protein, built up from amino acids. The enzymes in your body require amino acids. They are protein based, little nanomachines. So the more tissue you've got, the more enzymes you need. So the requirements of protein to sustain and maintain a bigger body go up. And so that's the real simple explanation is really the reduction in animal protein in the diet. Obviously, things like vitamin D does play a role as well. It actually helps increase calcium uptake, which so it has a certain effect in terms of certain key critical enzymes that are involved in bone development, together with retinol and together with menaquinone 4. But if you don't put enough protein in the system, you're not going to get the growth. You're not going to get the muscular skeletal growth. It won't happen. So it's fundamentally as simple as that. And you can see it all around the world, where even amongst tribal societies, you look at the societies that actually have less protein intake, access to protein, they're much shorter. Simple as that. There's a tribe, I remember Mary talking about, very close to the Maasai. Genetically, they are closely related. I'm trying to remember, there's in East Africa, there's actually, there's a tribal name. I just can't remember it. It's part of an ethnic group that they are related to, but still, some are shorter, some are taller, and the only difference is the animal foods that they consume. It's quite simple as that. Oops. What's the title of the Taurine book you have? I would like to download it. I can't remember it. So it's off the NIH that I actually got it. I've got it somewhere. But I'm also a bit cagey about giving out I want to actually do a whole lot of videos. That's why. So I'm a bit selfish at the moment, not telling anyone how to get access to the materials that I get. That's deliberate. Sorry, but I don't want people to get it, because if I make it available, what's going to happen is a lot of other people out there that are competitor channels are going to basically make use of it as well. And that's the only maybe later on at a future date when I've done quite a lot of videos in regards to it, I'll make a lot of the material that I use, the incidental material that I refer to that I don't use in my videos because I use studies. I'll make that available at some point, but not at this point because I just don't want the stuff to get out there. I'm selfish. I want to basically, promote it through my channel primarily for some time and get the benefit. Well, that's part of it anyway. It's a key component. I do have some other research in other stuff as well, like choline and other things like that other people are not aware of. And so I keep them under the hood, so to speak. When I do the videos, I release the studies and different materials, but I don't tend to share prior. You can understand I'm protecting my channel's long-term interests. So that's how it goes, Deb. That's how it goes. This channel comes first. Vitamin A toxicity, thoughts on perhaps reaction it was delivering that guy. I should have a video next week. It's actually going to be two parts. It's going to be a part one, which will sort of lay out some of the ancestral eating patterns and stuff like that, and and the retinol levels. And then it will basically look into also the, who are these people? Some of the information relating to some of the issues with storage and stuff like that. And then the second part, which is still in development, the second part, I'm going down multiple rabbit holes currently. And the purpose of that will be to look at how the body gets deranged in order to for these things to happen that some people are observing. So we need to explain the phenomenon of the so-called toxicity beyond just people having excess amounts, massive amounts where obviously, they're not normal physiological levels. When you're out there taking, I think one person was taking per day 3.5 million IUs. I mean, come on. And other people are taking like a kilo, the equivalent of over a kilo of liver, like 100-fold of the RDI. So these sort of excessive levels are what are in the literature. Why people are at lower levels, that's a very different, more complicated picture, and I don't want to give too much away at the moment, but that will be in the second video. So the first video is to sort of say, well, this is what humans have been doing for quite some time. There's a claim that he's made, and he hasn't mechanistically proven, or with research, all the stuff that he's used is associational, anecdotal, stuff like that. There can be other factors that can drive that. But at the same time, there's a threshold for anything. There's a threshold for whatever. I mean, excess of anything will cause some deleterious problems. You shove too much anything in the body, there's still a rate limiting. There are so many enzymatic processes that are happening in the body that can store things away or do things. You go over a certain level, the body just can't actually cope with the excess. And remember, he was actually supplementing a lot of his clients' retinol, which is something that is a no-no. I would never supplement people, and he went from one extreme to another and sort of ignores, I mean, I've told you guys how matrix metalloproteinase, collagen degrading enzymes are produced in the liver. If you go very low retinol and very low vitamin D is what he's recommending. If you go very low on these things, what actually ends up happening is if you get exposed to certain different things or whatever pathogens in the environment, you will generate massive amounts of matrix metalloproteinase. You will break down collagen. and you'll have collagen derangements. That's not a healthy way to actually live, you know. So, zero retinol or zero vitamin D, that's just nonsense. There are physiological limits. There are things like, I'll give you an example, pantothenic acid, which is vitamin B5, because it can store. Unfortunately, I have to get that video. I have to ask Bart for that video to put it on my channel, because I did a video with him. I don't want to have to redo the damn video. I'll have to ask him to send me because he's changed his channel at the moment completely. So because of YouTube going after him, and I'd like to put, because that one is not, there's no swearing, there's no contra, really. It's just basically an explanation on the information. So I'll try and get that off him and actually post it on my channel about pantothenic acid, how it can store. And so if you go into high levels, that's why I always recommend, if you're going to use to help the beneficial bacteria B complex, 3 months, no more. Unless you take antibiotics again and you need to restore again. So, but usually you should have a washout period. But it's, again, pantothenic acid can affect, can store and then get into excess and then cause insomnia. There's the back part of the lower back part of around the reptilian brain. Those cells there can be affected from excess pantothenic acid and cause insomnia. So anything at a certain threshold can cause problems. That's illogical. But going from one extreme saying, retinol's fantastic, and then retinol's the devil incarnate, is just illogical when there are so many receptor sites throughout the whole body which are vitamin D and retinol dependent. It's just nonsense. It's just reductionist sort of thinking on his part, to say the least. That's just but anyway, there is a video coming in that direction. I've just been too busy with a lot of other things, work and family, that basically haven't had a chance to really do much stuff. And I did something yesterday, arsenic, because it was one that I'd promised somebody ages ago and I never did it. And so I felt that I had to do it. And so give them a bit of information. And that's, because some people can get like acute, problems, and that's probably the importance for affecting so many millions of people around the world is I prioritize that as a higher thing than just a polemic against some other guy on the internet of being of a lower priority. But it will be done this week. Cool beans. How are you? Hi, Harry. I'm curious as why when I supplement Taurine, Nature's Life brand, I get diarrhea within half an hour from only taking half a gram, but if I eat foods high, I don't react. It's probably because you may be high emulsification of the bile. So that's probably what it is. So what people do sometimes is, I don't know what your gallbladder state is. It's probably it's related to your gallbladder in that regard. Also, your motility may be out of whack in that regard. So you may still have some derangements in motility. You still may have also certain bacterial imbalances as well. So there's 3 potential reasons. One, related to motility, that it's still sorting itself out, the gut motility, that is, because it does regulate it. And the other thing is, it can be basically the gallbladder. That usually tends to be 90% tends to be the gallbladder. Some people may generate far more bile salts as a consequence. So that may be the problem with you. If you persist, it will normalize itself. But sometimes giving it a miss, sticking to just the animal foods for the time being and give it a year or so, and then try it again and see how, so, but you have to be very strict carnivore for a year. to normalize those sort of things, and then you can take a bit, and by then technically you should see improvements in the bile functioning, and then it will be less of a problem. But I think it's probably some sort of issue with your bile flow, that it's actually exacerbating it. So, and I've known that some people that have got certain like excessive flows and stuff like that, taking milk thistle or choline can tend to basically normalize and sort that out. But it depends. So you could give those two things a bit of a try and see whether things get normalized. I mean, at the end of the day, we get taurine in the diet. We also endogenously synthesize it from methionine. So it's not as if, and if you're young enough, you probably don't need it. It's usually older people that can synthesize less and are eating less meat or whatever. There can be, if you're getting enough meat and you're getting enough eggs and meat and stuff like that in your diet, you probably don't need it. Give it to your mum or to your partner or whatever. But I would still basically try and actually avoid it for the time being, stick to the foods, and then in a year's time, try it again and see what happens. Hopefully by then things will have re-regulated themselves within your digestive system, and then you won't have this problem. It's hard to, without testing, without, sending you in to do a scan on your gallbladder to see what state it is, doing a number of tests and stuff like that. As I said, this is not my day job. You would have to go and do a consultancy with somebody like Bart Kay or Mary Ruddock or somebody like that, and them send you away to do certain tests. I know Mary actually has, I believe she has certain types of contracts with certain companies that do testing. So that's one option. The other option is some people basically add a bit more dairy, and that tends to sort the problem out, because dairy does have a bit of a, if you're missing certain bacterial strains of the lactobacillus type, it tends to actually become a bit more constipating, which can be a problem for people that eat a lot of dairy. I used to have that problem, but for people that don't have that problem, have the opposite problem, it can actually sort of bring things back to sort of balance while allowing them to take taurine for other benefits. So it's, and allowing their body over time to adjust and settle down and sort out these sort of issues without having to spend a whole lot of money to test. So which way you go is your business, because it's your money, your life, your body. So I'll let you decide which approach you take. Phoenix compilation. I've had 2 gallbladder sludge episodes since taking taurine. Yeah. Can you explain why exactly that happens? My cravings for milk has dropped dramatically. Could this be related? Possibly. I'd suspect so. Yeah. Look, what I said just earlier to Cool Beans, that taurine can sometimes, I had similar issues with sludge flow. It could vary. So I'd go from constipation to diarrhea and back again. So I went through this sort of couple of months. It was, let's say, quite disturbing. And I haven't had an episode like that for ages, but a couple of years back, I did have sort of a dramatic episode. So it was very uncomfortable. And so, yeah, I know what you mean. Because it does actually increase bile flow. It does emulsify, and reduce emulsify gallstones, break them down and break the sludge down as well. So if you've been on a kibble diet, like a lot of us have, to some extent, you will have actually had a sluggish in a gallbladder that doesn't function properly. And all I can say to people is, if they find that uncomfortable, just lower the amount of intake of taurine and go slower. Some people prefer just saying, nah, bugger it, I'm going to go really hard and just clear it out. And others go, well, no, I'll do it slowly, less discomfort over many months or whatever. I can't tell you how to do it. Your life. You have to work that one out, which way you want to go. But yes, it does definitely mobilize sludge, and it will emulsify and break down gallstones. So you will periodically get, if you've got gallstones and you've got bile sludge that's built up from your past lifestyle and indiscretions, you will basically go through a number of months. It can vary from people to people of some of these discomforts related to it. So yes, that's how it goes, unfortunately. As I said, none of us are ancestral, and we've done plenty of damage to different systems to cause us a lot of this grief. Continue. In fact, I use oysters to relax my digestion. I might have. Seems to work. I've only taken taurine supplementation for the second time. Every time I take it, I get the same results. Give it a miss. Look, oysters are very high. If you consume 100 grams or 3.53 ounces, just slightly over 3.5 ounces, you will basically get about 1.2 grams of taurine. Yes. And I always say to people, also consume taurine with food is probably for people that do have some of these issues. It tends to be less of a problem where you consume it without food. It tends to create more of these problems for some people. So play around with or without food and see how it works for you. Obviously, if indigestion, with food is much better, because you're basically going to improve the stomach function. I've done a video. Anybody can search for it, Harry Serpanos stomach, and you'll find that video. I cover that quite comprehensively. Why is that? I'm 22 and have autism. I've been on a carnivore diet. So you're pretty young. So you probably haven't accumulated too much bile sludge or stuff like that, or problems like that. But also there is the FXR sort of enzymatic, where that may be not functioning properly to recycle the actual. So there you may need a bit of milk thistle and choline to basically sort that out. And also choline would also help with your autism as well. So consider that. Is it possible I have sensitivities to the industrial processing amino acids? If you're taking powders, I wouldn't be taking powders. They've got low utilization. Eat real animal foods, basically. There are a lot of fillers and a lot of other stuff in there. Unless I know the brand, unless I've researched it, I don't recommend protein powders, period. I very rarely do put people on essential amino acids, and that's people that don't get enough protein, older people and stuff like that. That's sort of a, yeah. Okay, I have to catch up on Letter Fuchs. Thanks. See you, Tracy. Carl, hello. For digestion, gallbladder issues, what are your recommendations? Taurine doses, and should you take it with take it with a meal, and about 2 grams. Start at that level, 2 grams per meal, and then you can progress all the way up to much higher levels, like 3 or 4 grams. But that's, play around with it, see how you feel, see how you progress. sometimes people, depends on, whether you like punishment. Sometimes you can really go high, your body can really sort of get disturbed quite a bit, but it may take less time to clear out and sort out. Some people just like to do it much slower and more comfortable and less traumatic for them. As I said, play around with the dosages in that regard. If you've got really severe digestive issues, I would at a minimum try to get 4 grams in per day. 6 to 8 would also be pretty good for a number of months to sort of sort this out. Now, the extra amount, doubling the amount or increasing it by 50% up to 6 or 8 can cause additional distress, digestive distress, until things get sorted out. As I said, there's no easy solutions for this. Once you've got gallbladder issues and stuff like, and digestive issues, it takes time for the body to adjust. If you want quicker adjustment, keep the diet clean. The more there's a lot of like processed foods got emulsifiers, cause a lot of digestive problems. Certain alcohol sugars cause a lot of problems. Sometimes it pays to go cleaner and stick to just animal foods and nothing else, and taking taurine supplementation to sort out. You may also have fatty liver, pre-existing fatty liver. You may, for a period of time, want to take a higher dose of choline supplementation to export fat. If you do a search on my Harry Serpanos methylation, I have done a video on choline covering the fatty liver issue as well. So you may have pre-existing things. Usually people that have got gallbladder issues usually have some liver issues as well. So yeah, do check out that video. It'll give you about some additional information as well. Anyway, yes, Shelley knows. Yes, nothing like it. That was for that earlier one. You're welcome, Gary. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, precisely. That is my sentiment. Because I'm not claiming that people are out there. Well, I've had a few people that have come to my channel and sort of asked me certain questions, then I've realized that they were from another channel or supporting another channel, like they were, and I'm going, that's a bit mischievous. You're a moderator on that other channel. Why are you, so yeah, there's always that sort of stuff. And the suspicion was because it was taurine related and stuff like that. I go, why are these people showing such interest? Because usually from way back, I've been talking about taurine. I've been talking about matrix metalloproteinases and collagen sort of degradation, collagen turnover, collagen dysfunction in the body. All these are sort of interrelated in many regards. When you're looking at it from a more understanding the physiology in a more dynamic way, you realize that all these things are regulating different systems and interacting with certain systems, and certain enzymes are interplaying, and certain ions are being regulated through a number of the ion channels, and certain swappings of ions through, across the membranes between the inner and bloodstream and cell sort of fluids. Let's use simplified language. And so I've sort of covered those sort of things more comprehensively, to sort of in a more simplified way, to allow people to understand how the body really sort of works, and why things just, that people claim out there just don't make sense, because it just goes contra to the way physiology works. So that's a sort of thing, and then try to provide information for people on a number of different levels that can help them. And even, taurine is not, it's an important part of animal foods. It's an important constituency. I mean, I could say a lot about choline, I could say a lot about carnosine, carnitine, and all these, and probably have talked about them a bit. We'll do future videos on those things as well. They do have a lot of benefits, a lot of amino acids as well. We think about antioxidants, but do people realize that a lot of amino acids have a regulatory, indirect and direct effect on the antioxidant system of our body? So it's a much more complex picture, and I sort of, through my videos, I've tried to build up the sort of the layers of how animal nutrition has all these interactions and effects in. I think I explained it very easily once. I think, yes, my erratic brain, I'm all over the place. Sorry about this. I think the simplest explanation is I'm making a case for animal foods, which is pretty much it. I'm making a case for animal foods in the best way that I can by demonstrating that animal foods have these unique properties that can regulate the body and also have an important immunomodulating effect to strengthen the body and make us more robust and resilient, as we've always been in our ancestral state. And it's really explaining these things and nuancing things and clarifying things that then make it possible for people to understand and go, yes, now I get it. Now I get it why animal foods are important in the diet of humans. And that's what I'm trying to do with my channel. That's the purpose. That's the goal, to sort of blow away all the bullshit, all the notions, and really just lay it out why animal foods are the most important pillar for human health and for human being able to thrive. So I hope I am making the case for animal foods. I do truly hope I am, because that's the purpose of being here. If I'm not, I'll really be disappointed with myself. Thanks, mate. You're welcome. G'day, Zach. Good to see you, mate. You're welcome. Bruce, where have you been hiding? The US is a crisis right now. Yeah, look, most parts, Europe's even in a bigger mess currently. Their sort of situation, as I've been saying, I'm actually even scareder at the moment about Europe than I was a month ago. In some of the manufacturing plants in Germany at the moment, they're only doing 2 days a week. 2 days a week. That means for the other days, 3 to 4 days a week, they can't get enough materials to run the factories, either enough energy or raw materials that they were getting from Russia and the Ukraine. That's how pretty bad it is at the moment. And obviously, a lot of contracts, international contracts, like out of Australia and many other parts of the world that are going directly to China and other parts, and Japan and Northeast Asia, they're already locked in, those contracts, like yearly contracts, or I think Japan even has some like 5-year contracts, and so does China have a couple, which basically means that having access to materials from Australia is not feasible at this stage either. It's pretty bloody hard in that regard. Europe, yeah, things are going to be very dicey, especially next year in Europe. I don't, yeah, you think the US is bad, mate? And recently, you know, with the actual explosion of that down in Texas of the LNG terminal, I mean, that means less exports to Europe in terms of even expensive energy, because that's 4 times more expensive than the energy that they were getting, because it has to be shipped over. It's not pipelined over, and also the production costs are much higher. Yeah, so it's, yeah. You might as well turn off the lights in Europe. That's how bad things are going to get. Yeah. I would not be surprised if I saw starvation and people dying in Europe. I'm not kidding you. This is how bad things could get. When you go from 3 or 4 days of production down to 2 days, and the crisis is not fully hit yet, we're not even in September or the next year, you know, it's frightening. And you've got lunatics on the green front saying, no, we don't want to turn on the coal-fired power stations. We don't want to do any of this. Let's just basically turn off the lights in Europe. Are you absolutely crazy? Things are worse in Europe, believe me. You know, things are bad in the US. I recognize that. There's a lot of, but you guys get upset. You know, your fuel goes up 10 cents, and you guys are ready to start another revolution in the US, another civil war or something. So no, you have never seen anything like Europe. Europe is like it's so close to the edge economically at the moment. It's a disaster. Thanks to our dear friend Biden, who tried to break up the alliance between Germany and Russia, and as a consequence, exacerbated the whole problem. What there should have been is there should have been pressure, and this goes for all the Europeans. You know, Germany was running shotgun over everyone else, especially even Merkel, the previous chancellor. She's got a lot to answer, that woman, a lot to answer, you know, because she created the dependency. When there's massive gas fields in the south of and in parts of Greece, Cyprus, and you know, places like Israel and all that, gas pipelines from that region into Europe would have basically created independence, energy independence for Europe. You know, so they got a lot to answer for. You know, the Brussels bureaucracy and all that. You know, the Brussels bureaucracy is still basically, you know, saying that we can solve this with more solar panels and windmills. They're absolutely lunatic. I mean, production has collapsed in Europe, especially in Germany, that have lost a lot of energy imports. They don't even have LNG plants, you know, or terminals. I mean, Greece has got 2, and I think they're building another 2. I mean, Greece has got more capacity. Actually, Greece actually produces far more energy than from petrochemical products, because they've got a lot of refining as well compared to the rest of Europe. That's because the ship owners are the biggest merchant navy. You know, everybody thinks about Greece, and I'm going, no. You know, you think about Greece, just take a look at the terminals, take a look at the actual stuff coming in. Nah, you know, they got problems, debt problems and stuff like that, which they could fix if they tapped into their gas fields over a decade or more, you know. But the reality is Northern Europe is in an absolute dire strait. You know, you guys are heading for a Great Depression, pretty much. Northern Europe is toast. You guys are finished. You know, you're going to collapse if you don't get cheap energy into the system, which basically means groveling to Putin. Yeah, awful thing. Yes, nobody's going to do that, so it's going to get worse before it gets better. So pretty much. But you can't expect somebody, this is the craziest. People say, oh, well, Putin's stopping these shipments or this or that or whatever. And I'm going, well, you guys just put sanctions. If you had put sanctions on me personally as a person, like my next door neighbor told me to F off, would I basically then go around to my next door neighbor and hand them some food? No. So why would Russia, basically, when they've been told to F off, would do that is beyond me, As I said, I'm against their invasion. That was wrong. But had the Biden administration not pushed Zelensky to not ratify the Minsk 1 and Minsk 2 agreements, because he thought he had the backing of the US, so he could get away with it, tell the Russians, bugger off, we're not going to, we may have signed this agreement, but we're not going to ratify it, to piss them off. So, because basically, Biden was running the agenda for the State Department, and the hawks, the lunatics, as I call them, in the State Department, who think they can run the whole world. Those people are basically who use the American population, the poor people of America, as cannon fodder in all their wars of aggression around the world. That's the reality. That's the mess. That doesn't mean I want to be under Russia or China. Definitely not. I'd rather be under the US. They're a much more, relatively more democratic society. Their populations tend to have similar values to mine. So definitely, there's more synergies there. But at the end of the day, this administration has made an absolute mess of the situation, has created a crisis when there was no crisis. You want to basically get Europe to redirect. Well, the Americans could have come in with special investments and said, look, we're going to basically help and push for and encourage the Greek government, because they tend to be very pro-American. So they tend to basically, if American were, to develop the gas fields and provide energy independence. But when you've got the, Newfoundland, and you've got some of the others from the State Department coming through and saying, oh, we shouldn't build the East Med gas pipeline because it upsets Erdogan. And I'm going, so you don't want to basically provide energy independence, but you want to cut energy supplies to Europe from Russia. Well, that's smart. So you want to collapse Europe and then make them the enemy because they'll get pissed off with you. So what sort of logic is going through their minds is beyond a joke. They are completely crazy. Anyway, let's move on. This is a nutritional channel. I need to remind myself. Yes. Yes, it does. It does. Definitely does. Thanks. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, look, I had the same thing. I went through this. Initially, I had a lot of disc issues. A lot. I'm not kidding you. A lot. I had about 3 months where I just went through, let's say, diarrhea hell and issues like that. But then it all settled down. I just pushed through it. I know it was really uncomfortable and I wasn't enjoying it. Nobody does enjoy these. But, I look back and I said, well, you did this to yourself. You weren't ancestrally. You were eating a lot of crap. You did cause these issues, fatty liver, gallbladder issues and stuff like that. Now you're paying for it, just the way it goes. But it does have a lot of things. Just reminding, it does have some longevity things as well. That's another. Hopefully I can. That video's. I'm not going to promise anything because with my schedule, it's all over the place. But I do have a video, an upcoming video. It's probably going to be next month. It's on longevity, and it will cover how it interacts with a number of different pathways within the body. you know, the longevity experts out there say these are the things that we need. They're looking for pharmaceutical solutions, Shell. So we'll pump you with a whole lot of drugs that are untested in order to give you longevity. Unlikely. You know, it's like the association with metformin. Oh, metformin gives you longevity. No, it doesn't. It's just an association. Healthy user bias and many other things. And I'm going, you know, have they mechanistically proven it? No. Could it be other factors? Potentially. Does it create a lot of deficiencies and side effects? Bloody hell it does. So is it a good idea? Yeah. But actually, taurine has actually been shown in research to affect exactly the pathways that are basically these longevity people talk about. So really, animal foods are basically a longevity food. Exactly. Sure. So anyway, let's move on. Can autism really be cured? That's a medical claim, Bruce. You know, this channel could be removed if I made such a medical claim. I think that a species-appropriate diet will improve the condition. We've seen it with a number of people in the carnivore community that are either high-functioning autistic or have general different types of spectrums of autism, seem to basically, you know, you get the taurine, which has got the calming effect on, which really improves things. Choline seems to help as well. So eat more eggs is a good solution for that as well. So there's a number of factors there that seem to improve the condition. If you do it for long enough, multiple decades, could it reverse a lot of the damage caused in that early life and remodel things and all that? Potentially. But can we say it with certainty? No, because we don't have any studies to say it. We can just speculate. But anecdotally, we see a lot of improvements amongst people with autism when they go on a carnivore diet. So I would tend to say that you will actually definitely get improvements. Cure is a very yes, but I'd say you'll be much better, much better than you would have been on a species inappropriate diet. And also, I mean, there's phosphatidylserine is another thing that can actually silence certain genes. Now, I've never been able to get. I thought about, you know, there's Tom. Actually, I should ask Tom because he's actually a high functioning. He's got autism. I should actually ask him to try phosphatidylserine for a year and see at a high dose whether he sees any changes, because it does silence certain genes that are involved in neurological function. And so can these genes be turned off, so to speak? And then with a species appropriate diet, remodel and improve. Actually, next time I speak to him, yep. Actually, thanks for that, Bruce. I should have thought of that myself earlier. Yeah, it can be. That's what we know at this stage. That is definitely what we know. Whether we can silence certain genes or not is that question mark that I just mentioned just a while ago. I will ask Tom, actually. I should actually ask him to, next time he's got one of his live streams. I'm usually at work, and sometimes, it's close to the times that I usually have my meetings and stuff like that. So it's a bit inconvenient. I'll pop on sometimes, say hello, and I may leave a comment there and maybe even try to drag him over to my channel here and have a bit of a chat. You're welcome. Yeah, those things won't help. But I think that there is there's a really strong association between autism and vitamin D deficiency in mothers. Vitamin D plays an important role in the development of the brain. Also, taurine tends to be very highly associated as well with autism. So lower taurine levels tend to be found in people with autism. So it's vitamin D and taurine seem to be the two things, and they do play an important role in brain development. So, you know what I mean? So there's definitely definitely with the current kibble culture, autism rates are going through the roof, much higher than in the past. So I would say yes, there is probably something related to the lack of important nutrients within animal foods that are lacking with people consuming far more kibble related foods, far more plants. So, and also obviously processed food is even more devoid from a lot of nutrients, which can be a problem as well. And unfortunately, a lot of mothers nowadays crave that sort of garbage, and it's encouraged because apparently, you know, food doesn't matter. It's just all in the genes, apparently. You know, genetics have just changed all of a sudden, which is a load of bullshit. Yep. There are some genes that can be turned on that do exist, but if they don't get turned on, they're not expressed, you're not going to get the condition. So, and there are some genes related to autism as well. And that's why I said earlier, so it's not just nutrition that plays a role, but I would say you're the person who's got the autism, their nutrition plays a role, but not just that. It's also the genetic inheritance or the epigenetic switching that's actually happened from the mother. So, but then again, I don't blame the mother. It's just basically they've been conditioned and brainwashed from the ignorant medical fraternity when it comes to these sort of things. So, you know, when does intermittent fasting cause a stress to the body? Will it help with insulin sensitivity? It usually to get a certain level of insulin sensitivity, you really have to sort of fast like 3 days. Sammy, you sort of really have to fast for 3 days to really get into that highly sensitive state. And then when you come out of it, no indiscretions. Keep it clean. You know, probably a broth, something like that. Then transition to meat and fat from an animal source and continue on that way. And you should keep your insulin to glucagon at 1.3, which means you will maintain sensitivity at a much lower insulin to glucagon ratio. But that's a sort of a blunt way of actually doing it. Now, obviously, that can, you know, that may not work to the degree you want, and that may be due to mitochondrial insufficiency, which is another issue altogether. That's due to severe mitochondrial damage. You usually find it with people that are basically have gone through chemotherapy or had cancer, or have caused, you know, excessive amount of seed oils, like myself, that did a lot of damage. And so it took me some time to repair my mitochondria, and I'm still on that pathway. I still haven't finished on that pathway, but repairing my mitochondria over time actually increased my energy production and improved my ability also to lose weight, to basically improve my insulin sensitivity. So there's a lot of factors, you know. I mean, if you're in a glycolytic state, your mitochondria are not able to, you know, oxidize fat in an efficient way, you know, that's a problem, you know. So getting into an insulin sensitive state. So there's a lot of it's more complicated. Mike, how are you, mate? During my first 2 months of carnivore, I was suffering nausea, and that revolved after pooping, and one time I ended up vomiting after having poop. It's not not anymore. What could have been the cause? Gallbladder related. That's what it is. It's usually gallbladder related. Yeah. It's sort of, it can be the stomach as well, but it usually is primarily the gallbladder related. So yeah, you're just one of those. It only took you probably a short amount of time to clear. You may have just had some small stones, maybe a bit of sludge, and you didn't have a lot. You hadn't caused too much damage, but it was enough to cause some, some issues there, but eventually it just resolved and cleared itself out. So some people do get like this when they actually eat too much fat. They get this sort of like nausea and like a vomit type thing. It's really back to the gallbladder, so in most cases. But if it's mild and it's largely resolved, I think you've been doing taurine as well. That's probably helped as well, sort it out a bit faster. Anyway, yes, you should check out Europe. That's a fun place. I ate 3 eggs for breakfast, ribeye, and ground beef for dinner. Is that enough taurine or choline? Depends on the sourcing of your ribeye. Is it aged? Is it freshly slaughtered? If it's freshly slaughtered, it should have sufficient taurine. If it's been aged and hung up for 18 months in a refrigerator, then sold to the supermarket, then it may have very little. So you'll definitely get some from eggs, because eggs are, is self-contained. It's not going to go anywhere. But when it comes to animal products of the ruminant sort, it really has to do how long has it been hanging in a refrigerator, and when did it get to you. So that's a really hard one to say. Choline, most people should get enough unless they have a genetic snip like me that can't do the conversion and endogenously generate choline. I think I did a recent video covering that anyway. Again, covering some of the points on choline. Food and all that. Most people can get it from food. They're fine. I usually, like yesterday, I had 8 eggs. So I definitely got more than a gram. So I didn't have to supplement. So in that regard. But, because you're looking at what is it? 1.469 milligrams per egg. So 8 eggs is 1.175.2 grams. So basically, yeah, I get enough. But if I don't, sometimes I get sick and tired of eggs, and then I'll just take a choline supplement, because I do have a genetic snip that doesn't allow me to do the conversion, which is, unlucky for me. Anyway, it's a rare thing. Not many people have it, but I do have it. And that's why I'm able to, if I don't get enough choline in the diet, I can actually end up with fatty liver very fast. So that is a health problem that I can induce myself, not getting enough choline. But generally, most meat will have enough choline, eating a number of eggs and beef and stuff, or lamb, or, you should get enough choline in it for most people. And then you also endogenously producing some. So that should cover you in that regard. And also you probably don't have the methylation issue, the 677, which is the MTHFR type gene, which I have as well. Aren't I lucky? And so you can use the primary pathway to methylate. And so the secondary one, which is the choline betaine, is important, but not as important. For me, it is critically important. One, to basically get enough riboflavin to improve the other side of things, the primary one, and then get enough choline to cover the lack of conversion issue. So, yes. So these are the sort of genetic differences. It's a bit like the Irish with their carotenoid conversion thing. You know, there are these sort of regional, the sort of variations that exist. And it was associated with autism. Supposedly, I think it's a combo for prescription drugs and shit food. Yeah, there's a lot of, look, problem is there's a lot of associational stuff out there, and a lot of question marks on all that sort of stuff. And autism has been around far longer than Advil and many other things. One thing that I can say in general, it is a systemic sort of derangement from a lot of multiple factors. And that could be also one, but it may be just associated and nothing else and have no relationship whatsoever. So it's a bit like metformin and longevity. It's an association, but there's a whole lot of other healthy user bias things that these people do that basically could explain this, and it's only a small percentage. They're not getting a massive improvement. So you got to be very careful with associated data. As Mr. K would tell us, and I've just lost my spot. Thank you, StreamYard, for mucking things up for me. Here we are. Good. Luke, have you taken the worm pills? Not complete without. Oh, yes, those ones. Yes, the Ivor, yeah, Becky thing. No, they can't. That's bullshit. I've explained that before, Bruce. It's nonsense. The MMR does not cause it. That he's a crackpot, that guy. He was actually developing his own alternative, and he basically jumped on the bandwagon of one group that was actually taking to court the company. And he was doing that because he had ulterior motives. He wanted to promote his own vaccine that he had which was a competitor to MMR. But then again, what happened was when he got struck off, he lost a lot of reputational ability and he was pushed to the sideline. And then they offered him a job, these people that are part of that community. And they basically, and ever since, he's been bidding their work. Not all vaccines are bad. Experimental stuff like mRNAs and viral vector and stuff like that have not gone through efficacy, plus have shown in oncology to be very problematic. They are definitely a problem. But the MMR, as I said, they did the study in Osaka, Japan, 2 years. They withdrew the MMR from all children. None of those children saw any change in the rate. Actually, over those 2 years, the rate of autism actually went slightly higher. Slightly. Not statistically significant, but higher. Did not reduce, if that was the causal effect. Nothing to do with it. I would suspect, and then I would suspect what really is causing this increase in autism in Japan is in the last 20 years, I think it's getting to 30 years now, they westernized their diet and introduced a lot of seed oils and many other things. I suspect that has more to do with it than the MMR, so, and a number of other factors as well. That's for another day, but definitely not the MMR. Because if it was, you'd see this massive change in autism rates over those 2 years for those kids. Didn't happen. They increased at the same rate, slightly higher, statistically not significant, but still. And I can't remember whether it was the second or third, whether it was the third or fourth year when they reintroduced the vaccines, whether it actually went down slightly. But again, not statistically significant. But again, sort of making the whole argument just nonsensical, Bruce. Nonsensical completely. We need to basically base it on good, sound research. And something like that, where you withdraw it completely from the population and you don't see any change, just because something is associated doesn't mean it's causal. You've got to prove its causality. And that's what the other side hasn't done for the MMR. They haven't. So they're wrong. Now, it could cause other issues. That's a different thing altogether. That still would have to be researched and all that. But I haven't heard any other arguments for other things that I think there's one or two people that's saying a few other things, not related to autism, but other things, but they haven't provided any proof either. It's just, I don't know, idle speculation. And it just seems to happen in some countries where there's MMR, but not in others. So that doesn't make sense. It either happens everywhere or it doesn't happen at all. So I think even those ideas are a complete bust. Yeah. And so you will get more certain conditions in the US, but that's because the US is a more kibblized processed food environment. Much worse, further down the pathway of Pottinger's cat with inappropriate food supply in the US, where at least in some of these countries there's a bit of traditional foods as well. It's not completely and utterly deranged in that regard. Yes, very well said, Shelley. Yes. Yes, it's really nice how, the dictators of the world are loved by CNN, but, good, wholesome people of faith and others are hated by CNN. Isn't it great? Yes. What a channel. Oh, yes. What a moral fiber that channel has. Yes. They even support Erdogan, in Turkey, CNN Turk. They love him, absolutely love him. Yes, he's one of their favorite leaders. Yes, even though he invades northern Syria and ethnically cleanses under Biden's watch, he just ignores it. Oh, they're just Kurds. They can be ethnically cleansed. The Turks have been doing it for a long time, It's called genocide, but, they're our mates, so they can go and do some genocide. But if anyone else does genocide that are not our mates, that's illegal. It's a violation of international law. Yes. They are the CNN standards. Yes. No wonder people are. Yes. Yes. Say no more. Hit the like button. Oh, yes, please. Otherwise I'll become even more cynical than normal. Well said, Chill. But the new stuff, the mRNA, the viral vector and all that, the C19 stuff, yes. Definitely, if you want a dose of myocarditis, they're the best ones to use. Make sure you get a booster as well. What are your thoughts about Roy versus Wade being overturned? Oh, you're asking Shell. What am I? I don't know enough about the US. I don't subscribe to, euthanasia or abortions or stuff like that. I am religious. I'm a person of Greek Orthodox faith. But I don't really know enough about the legalities or the basis of that sort of the overturning. Did they actually, in terms of law, we're talking about strictly law here. I'm not talking about my personal ethical beliefs are different, but in terms of the legal, was it legally done properly? Like there are precedents, there is a sort of a pool of evidence that actually affects a decision. Even though I may disagree with the decision, like the original decision I may disagreed it. These people have poured onto certain stuff are they valid, their conclusions, in terms of legalistic things? But you've got to be very careful. I sort of do separate the two. Here's my belief. I disagree. I have these faith opinions, and then there's this other part, which is the legal side. And if I'm going to be technically, you could say, not bullshitting people and just being honest about the legal side of things, I have to look at it in a technical way and say, was the decision technically done properly in accordance to the Constitution of the US, the president's, the legal framework and all that, blah, 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 that sort of stuff. I'll leave that for the Americans to argue amongst yourselves. We've got enough problems down here in Australia, let alone having to deal with your problems. The Randall cycle's here. Oh, God, I hope you're engaging it now and then and really, giving it I would prefer more rights for everyone versus less. Yes, I agree. Yes. And less kibble as well. We don't want to be engaging you too much because, you're a busy lad. Being over engaged is just far too, exhausting for you. Anyway, let's move on. Yes. Very well said. US is getting dicey about with states not observing rulings of law and such. Okay. Are they? Okay. I haven't kept up to date but that's not a good thing either. I can disagree with a legal, with, let's say, a legislator's decision, a legal sort of, I'm a direct democracy guy, HD, and many others know as well. So I'm not really, but since the majority of people support having a representative system, not a direct democracy, we have to go with the majority. That's what they want. Well, that's what they've been brainwashed to believe is what they want. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. But yeah, it is a dicey thing when people start, on either side of politics, when they start sort of questioning the rule of law and stuff like that, or the constitutional framework and all that, it really tears away the foundation of a society and can lead to civil war. Once the sides no longer believe in the institutions, so to speak, even though they can have problems. No, humans create institutions, so they're not perfect. They always will have some level of corruption, some level of problems. But when you completely and utterly reject them, it doesn't really leave a lot of ground beyond after that for the two sides to basically have common ground to be able to discord within. The next stage is, people are killing each other. So it can be very dicey. That's true. It can be it's worrying, to say the least. I've always said that if there's a developed country that could go nuclear, could basically have a civil war, it's the US. I fear the US more. But now, with the energy crisis in Europe, I'm starting to wonder whether Europe could go first before the US or some countries in Europe, because things are getting rapidly, due to lack of food and energy, are rapidly getting into dicey grounds or areas. So it's bad. Yes. Yes. That stuff, which we can't talk about. Yes. Got to be very careful how we repeat these things on YouTube here. In the Geopolitics, I recommend the Duran, run by a couple of Greeks, good to be good. Yes. Depends on the Greeks. So Yes. Look, there's a couple of the nice thing that I found in Greek geopolitics is a lot of these guys are ex-military and they're well connected with a lot of people around the world, and they weren't, because a lot of, if you go back to the 80s and 90s and all that, a lot of Greeks, there was they maintained good relationships with China, with Russia, with many parts of the world. They always have had a very, and what has actually created is a lot of these, you could say, relationships and linkages. And you've got all these people that basically are aware of what other people are saying. Like there's a guy who's who lives in Greece. He's an Israeli or a Jewish person, and he basically knows a lot of the background, what's happening in Israel, and sort of the geopolitics there. And so you tend to get all these people that are connected. It's like a hub there that know all these people, and a lot of stuff about food supply. The other thing is the shipping industry. A lot of these people also know people, tycoons and people in the shipping industry, and it's a supply chain. All this stuff, goods moving around the world. They know what's happening. They've got more info in. You could say background information on what's being transported, who's transporting, and all that. And and less of this is covered, this detail. When you look at America, it's all basically, the geopolitics in America is sort of crude. It's unsophisticated. It's all about, oh, we don't like Russia or China, so we just make up a whole lot of shit, why they're bad. They're bad, bad, bad. And the other side sort of does something similar. And most of the Europeans just nod their head, most of the geopoliticians in Europe, except the French. But when it comes to the Greeks probably one of the most cynical people in the world. I come from one of those cynical people. That's probably why I'm so cynical. And they tend to basically, the politicians, I don't understand how the politicians can have a straight face. This is how good the politicians in Greece are. They've got a straight face when they just talk absolute bullshit. And some of them being caught in the background saying the complete opposite, because they know really what is happening, but they want to keep the US happy, their allies happy. And so they keep it all, in that background. But it's a quite interesting sort of environment where they know all these people, they know all these contexts, they know the flow of, and they really stick to the the core stuff. At the end of the day, a real society is the movement of food, energy, goods, materials and stuff like that. All that sort of stuff determines whether certain countries are going to be stronger or weaker, the money supply, that sort of stuff. These are the important things. All this other sort of airy-fairy nonsense that people talk about is just absolute bloody nonsense. It makes no sense. It's really these fundamental, and these are coming back to roost because the old thinking was wrong. The thinking, some of these geopoliticians in Greece were saying this sort of stuff, that we would have these sort of consequences. The supply chain is going to collapse and create massive inflation. They were saying this in the beginning of COVID. And people were demonizing him on the media. They were absolutely being demonized by politicians and all that these people, but they were right. Exactly what happened. Because they could see, they knew the supply chain. They knew how much investment was happening in the petrochemical industry, how much was being exported and transported, how much basically under utilization of LNG ships there was, all this sort of stuff. This is the unsexy stuff, but that's the important, it's all in the details, guys. That unsexy stuff is what gives you an overview, a picture where you go, okay, this is the amount, and I always look at shipping. I always look how much raw material like iron ore is going from Australia to China, or from this country to that country, sort of bulk commodities, and what is being exported, what is moved around. It gives me an idea of what the world economy is doing. how well global trade is, the flow of money between different centers. Is it more due to speculative, or is there real some underlying investment, factors there as well? And what will that translate 10, 20 years down the track when you do these things? These are sort of important. People don't look at those and they end up in airy fairy land. And a lot of the people advising out there are the D word comes into my mind, and they're being paid a shitload of money just to talk crap or advised crap. Yes. Look, there are some people that would want it to send it through the other way. It's not going to happen. That whole area is very unstable. What's actually happening? Israelis are actually sending it to Egypt, Alexandria, and the Greek ship owners have actually got most of the contracts. Exactly. Say no more. And basically, that's then being moved to Alexandroupoli, which is an area where the US have militarized it to the hell in Western Thrace. And so that's where a lot of it's going. There's a port there, big LNG port that's being built as well, not only a base there. And so at some point, I think if Netanyahu comes back into power, he was a big proponent of the pipeline to go through Greece, into Italy, and into Europe. So that was the East Med. So I think it's going to happen. Ultimate, long term, it will happen. And I know the Greeks have been dragging their feet, and they've been dragging their feet not because, for geopolitical reasons, actually an advantage for the country. For Greece, it's actually a great coup geopolitically. But the strongest industry and the most powerful lobbyists in Greece are the ship owners, and they're building a whole lot of LNG ships. They don't want the pipeline. They want to basically be able to ship it from those ports. They want LNG terminals. It's, again, all politics in that regard. So we may end up with a whole lot of LNG terminals in the Eastern Mediterranean, mostly in Greece, a couple in Egypt and Israel and Cyprus, and potentially also the pipeline at a later stage. So, yeah, it'll be interesting how that all flows. Obviously, the US did want to sell more gas, in particular shale gas. That's where it's primarily, that's why it's more expensive. It's 4 times more expensive after you've transported it, after you've basically liquefied it, and all this sort of stuff. So there's a lot of processes in between that actually increase the cost. There's a lot of, some of the geopoliticians in Greece believe that the US wanted to, Germany was becoming imperial under Merkel. She wanted to tie Russia with the rest of Europe and China and create this massive Eurasian sort of entity that basically would displace US influence. And so the best way was to break Germany's connection to Russia, Russian gas and oil. And by doing that, then they could basically have more control over Europe. But they didn't think of the ramifications. And the ramifications is they've created a massive crisis in Europe, which means they may lose Europe anyway, especially Germany, because they'll get pissed off so much that their economy and society, and once their people become more rebellious and say it's Americans' fault that we're in a mess economically, you could see the fracturing of the European Union and Europe itself. So I think Biden has really mucked it up with his lunatics in the State Department. They got their way initially, but they've also created an absolute mess. Obviously, there would have been an angle, yes, we can benefit as well, but I don't think it's the angle was so much we can benefit. I mean, the capacity to build capacity in the US energy system will take at least 3 to 5 years. So, if that was the goal, they would have started way back. They're trying to actually lower exploration in the US in petrochemical products, shale oil and gas. So I don't see it. That was the purpose. It was more geopolitically without thinking about the consequences of the economy, energy, and food. And they were just thinking, how can we break Germany away from Russia? That was the whole idea, the politics behind it. It was basically break Germany away from Russia, weaken Russia, then we can take on China. But what they've done is they've weakened Europe and they forced Russia together in bed with the Chinese. It all backfired. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. Should this guy go for his incompetence and senility? You know, does it require a rocket scientist to work that one out? No. The guy's incompetent. It's made a mess. Made a mess of US alliances with other people and made a mess. This could actually tear the whole fabric of a rules-based system around the world. That means a world where the majority of the societies believe in a rule-based system where nobody invades or attacks or, they trade amongst themselves and don't undertake warfare to gain access to markets and resources like we used to do in the past, constantly fighting amongst ourselves, empires against each other. The US international order system that was designed to basically do away with empires and create a stable global trading network. But when you start doing these idiotic things like the current administration is doing, you pull that apart. And it's very hard to put back together Humpty Dumpty once he's fallen off the wall. That's exactly what they've done, unfortunately. And now they're in such a mess trying to get as much, they were forcing. The reason why that explosion, the LNG explosion happened in the US was because they were trying to force more capacity out to get to Europe because they were desperate to get more. They went to down to Venezuela. Their arch enemies, Venezuela and Iran, trying to get additional supply from them. That tells you everything, how completely and utterly, they've lost the plot. They made a mess of the situation. They're trying to basically even get in bed with their ex-enemies to try and actually get additional supply to prevent Europe from collapsing because they don't want to give in to Putin. Say no more. That's the mess we're in at the moment. And Europe is going to be the part of the world that's going to pay for this the most. It's going to be devastating in Europe, the economic consequences. It's going to be the part of the world that will suffer the most because the rest of the world is still accessing Middle Eastern and Russian oil and gas through contracts. So they're locked in. So yeah. It's going to be a mess, to say the least. Things are going to get far more worse in the next 3 to 4 years before they get any better. Mm-hmm. People purporting heavy metal toxicity as one of the possible. If you've got basically low taurine levels, then you can't regulate the ions in the body, and also the excretion rate of heavy metals is reduced through the gallbladder. Taurine plays an important role in the regulation of excretion. So if you don't have that, but in an indirect way, it's associated, not causal. It's other derangements that are happening because of an overall diet and lifestyle that people have been pursuing in the last 70 odd years plus, where we've seen the really massive increases compared to the past. Anyway, Lukey's got some stuff for me. I hope it's rude and crude, and it makes me look like an absolute buffoon. If I can't laugh at myself, who or you guys, who will I laugh at? God, what? I have to say I enjoy Lukey's stuff all the time. Oh, wonderful. Animal food, nutritional value. Plant foods, nutritional value. Yes, big difference. And probably should bring it back to 100. I suspect there was more there. Yep, get a 90. Yeah, we can go there to 100. Yes, yes. Kibble eaters, cold and unhappy. People eating green products for taste pleasure. The lectin ripping their cells apart. Ah, yes. Nothing like a bit of gut discomfort to basically. I love it. Love it. Love it. Yes, yes. The Taurine king. The Taurine godfather. Actually, I should get a hat like that. Yes, now you've heard it from the Taurine godfather. Thanks, Lukey. Oops. Yes, I've been disloyal to Harry's live chats. Has been waking up daily to the Duran, so missing them. Okay, Fatty. Yeah, you can always watch either. You can interplay 1 week Harry, 1 week, because I'm fortnightly now, so you can interplay between me and those guys. Yes, yes, it's painful for everyone. And the problem is printing more money, which is what they'll do. They will debase the currency even further because they'll look after their banking mates and themselves, and they will print more to basically deal with the, or print less and raise interest rates. Oh, sorry, that's what I meant to say. And they will raise, initially interest rates to kill off you guys, and then they will print more money for themselves and justify that they're going to save everyone so they can overinflate assets so the rich can buy up everything and actually make a big profit again while everybody's going out like they did last time. That's what they do. Boom, bust, reinflate the bubble, keep it going, and keep, flush out more of the middle class, decimate more of the middle class, and basically keep the whole thing going. So the reality is it's a supply chain. You can't print food. You can't print oil and gas. You can't print raw materials. You either have enough of them in the supply chain or you don't to be able to produce goods and services. That's the biggest problem at the moment. So they're not going to get rid of inflation. Initially, they're going to do this. They'll reduce the money supply temporarily to some extent. They'll flush out us, so to speak, and then they will basically then refloat the boat, as they always do, for their own interests. They've done it before, even in recent times. Remember 2008? You think they won't do it again? They don't care, But the more times you do it, the more problems you create. You can only push the can down the road for so long before society explodes. And that's why I'm saying I do fear that the world is becoming much more dangerous because these people really, if you want to basically sort things out at this stage, you can kiss goodbye. You can't at this stage. But if you actually had like capital controls and you basically had certain export restrictions and you redirected, you nationalized the banks and created a national bank through the postal system. You did certain things to redirect investment, to start getting the country working properly and all that. You could basically stabilize things. That's not fix things immediately, but stabilize things. But they're not even going to do that. It's just the way it is. Yes, yes. Ah, yes, the porky and the arachidonic acid. Ah, yes. Definitely plays a role. Actually, a number of bodybuilders actually do consume arachidonic acid, specifically because it actually improves in the post-exercise healing and improves hypertrophy. That's why I say pork's pretty good for bodybuilders. They just are too scared of it. Why take a supplement that could be rancid? You know? So, yes, eat that little porky. More about food, more about food. Look, I would say whey protein is better than plant protein in that regard, but both are low in utilization as well. So better getting it from real food. Did you read my mind? Yeah, I'm not a supplement promoter. Let me put it that way. Thoughts on essential amino acid supplements to add protein needs? Yep, I do use them for older people, and also for people that get long COVID. It actually improves their outcomes together with taurine and vitamin D. So yes, I think they're a good idea. Especially people not getting enough, especially people not being on a carnivore diet. They are definitely a supplement that is very useful in combination synergistically for older people. EAAs together with taurine and together with leucine is a real good combination, and plus also vitamin D, because a lot of them in nursing homes have got very poor vitamin D status as well. So yeah, that sort of can be very useful for additional protein needs. I mean, if I was in a nursing home, that's the sort of supplements I'd be giving. That's relatively cheap. I mean, you gotta have people having the strength to get out of their seat and not have their ass wiped, or having to have enough staff to wipe people's asses because they can't get out of their seats. I mean, it actually is. It actually would be a labor saving cost in nursing homes to supplement these things. Would be cheaper than basically the cost of basically having people more frail and infirmed, where you have to clean them up and clean up. You know what I mean? All that sort of stuff. It's crazy, the world we live in. It's crazy, isn't it? They feed them kibble and they deteriorate in those nursing homes from protein deficiency and a whole lot of other deficiencies. Yes. Yes, couldn't have said it better. Oops. Yeah, that's a very good point about cadmium. Yeah. And arsenic. Yes, they are. They are. Depending on where they're sourced from, which parts of the world, they will vary in the concentrations. But yes, that is definitely true. Especially a lot of them are using like rice sources, and some other grains that tend to be much higher in these things. Yeah, that's true. Because they're trying to get the right amino mix. Yeah. Good point, Lukey. Very good point. But I have recommended Harry but to Durian locals community. There are a few carnivores on their local sites. Oh, thanks. Appreciate it, Fatty. Finn, appreciate it very much. Thank you very much. My grandson is autistic, non-verbal. He talks when he has something to say. Little bugger loves his steak and butter. He's on genus level. He learns very quickly. Great. Fantastic. Yeah. And that's the difference. What will happen is now that as he's consuming more of those animal foods, will get much better over time. You actually can see it. I mean, I've known some people where they've made those changes and they've noticed a big difference. Many of them, it was sort of more a higher animal-based, low-carb type approach. But, a number of years, a decade long, and they noticed a lot of dramatic changes and improvements to their children compared to, other children that were at similar levels before. So, yeah, nutrition does definitely help improve things. We turn over our cells. We turn over a lot of things. The things that we eat affect us epigenetically. So it can turn off and turn on certain, genetics. So, yes, very important. Growing fast on the meat. Anyway, more about that sort of stuff. Yep. Always used to be distracted by social settings. Have a hard time with noise, light, sensory stimuli. Lately, everything feels much more tolerable. If I still dislike being near lots of. Well, you've actually, with you had your Hashimoto's, you had all these other issues, but yeah, they've all sort of dissipated completely. And that's the difference. The more years you're on a species appropriate diet, the more benefits you'll reap. It's simple as that. And that's the take home message for everyone, including myself. For all of us, it's really the take home message. I forgot my coffee, didn't I? It's nearly 1 o'clock. Well, the thing is, I better save my images as well, Lukey, while I'm here, because otherwise my usual state that I'll damn forget. I will at some stage make a video of all the. Oh, there's Loki.
Hello, a bit later today.
And I'm just saving all those images that you gave me, so I can.
Well, I think I have one last one, by the way.
Okay, send it through. I will at some stage have to basically make like a video thing of all the different stuff that, because there's some really funny ones here. If I actually run them through and all that, it's going to be hilarious.
Definitely, and it would be a nice compilation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Bart ended up using because I had to give him access to the video, to do that thing with Ted and stuff like that. He contacted me and said, "Oh, can I?" And I said, "Yeah, no problems." So yeah, I just need to get back to. I want to get back to Bart next. You got him, that pantothenic acid one. I need to get that a copy off him for that one. So that's my aim. I really need to get that one. because it's one that I haven't seen anywhere else. It's an very old study, and yeah, nobody is born perfect, Taurine. Yes, your little thing, without saying something inappropriate, which I was about to.
Oh God.
Yes, it's the with what happened to Bart and all that. You sort of your mind goes, I've got to be careful. Don't say it. Hold back. The YouTubia sensor board may launch a full-blown attack. So you got to be careful. It is a bloody annoying, but anyway, what can you do? So what have you been doing recently? What's been happening?
Oh, so there was actually a company party just yesterday. So I did some socializing, which it had been a while since I went to a party with lots of people. So that was nice, I guess. And yeah, I've been training, just trying to get things in order. I've been deadlifting again because I stayed off for like a few weeks because I strained my lower back. Now everything seems to be fine, But I seem to I do need to go a bit more careful with it because I'm not that great. I'm not well coordinated, so I have to practice a lot just so I don't injure myself. So that's what's been happening on my side, and I'm still a bit annoyed at the fact that the UV index is really low this time of year, but whatever.
Okay. Yeah, well, we're both in the southern hemisphere, so so there's that sort of things.
Yep.
Didn't realize how far behind I am. Look, physical activity does help mobilize. It improves the function of the lymphatic system. It helps mobilize things and get things moving in the body. So yes, it does have a benefit. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a good functioning lungs, liver, and kidneys to detox and excrete and eliminate waste products or whatever it is, lungs, CO2, excess CO2, that is, and other things from the liver and sort of, and we should actually, to be more complete, I should say liver, gallbladder nexus, because that's really axis, which is what really it is, because it's, it's not merely the liver itself, it's using the gallbladder to excrete things, like you've probably heard me with certain minerals like manganese, 90% gets excreted via the bile. Other things, even other minerals, will get excreted through the kidneys. There are genetic variations, which is another factor, complicating factor. I mean, take, for instance, calcium. Some people will excrete most of their calcium through the kidneys, any excess, but some people actually will also not uptake it and excrete it through, the feces. And there can be some that can actually also end up through the bile, so but the majority tends to be, but there are variations. We suspect genes are at play, but we don't know which genes and why and why these variations. It's the reason why some people will excrete oxalate through their bowels and some through their kidneys, some through their skin and other different parts. And so you get people. I never had any real through my skin. But other people have got really severe oxalate dumping through their skin, nothing through their kidneys, no issues through their kidneys or bowels. Others get severe through their bowels, which you end up, with a lot of bleeding as well, because they're getting it through their bowels. And so you get all these and some get a bit through all these different ways, through their skin, through their bowels, through their kidneys. So there's so many variations, and probably driven slightly from some of the genetics, but don't really know. Let's be honest, some of this stuff is just complicated, to say the least.
Yeah, it's funny, but lately my mom has been complaining that she's getting like weird like rashes in like her arms when she consumes anything with nuts in it. And I'm like, okay, this is a bit suspicious. And I asked her, anything else you noticed? Oh, when I have anything with cinnamon in it, I get those rashes as well. This is like smelling like oxalate toxicity. And
Yeah, sort of.
she has
So
been a lifelong.
she's cut back on her plants, hasn't she?
Yeah, she has
Okay.
cut back and then whenever she consumes something like that, she's getting those reactions. And I think she has a fair bit of issues because she used to be into juicing
God.
over a decade ago. So
she's probably got even very high QMAX. She was probably like me, where I had really severe levels because I was doing a lot of spinach, like every morning, 100 to 150 grams of spinach with my bacon and eggs when I was doing keto. It's just standard thing. I know. But I ended up, and oxalates in spinach are very high. We're talking about 755 milligrams per 100. So we're talking about a lot, shitloads. I was getting massive amounts. And that's why I had a certain period of time that I went through oxalate hell, dumping, and I really severe through my kidneys. I had massive pain. I was, doing the citric acids, trying to get rid of the damn stuff. So I went through a very painful period. I had so much excess at some stage, I even basically had a bit of bleeding. So,
wow.
yeah, that's how bad it was. Nothing on my skin at all. But, and the only way I sort of realized it is just in around my sort of the anus area, there was basically, I did actually with some toilet paper and actually was able to see there were like these rough, when you touch them, rough. Now I know, yeah. So if somebody's eating, sorry about that, but touching it, you could actually feel the spikes. You knew that it was, there's a crystal sort of thing. So damn. So I've had the nasties, in that regard. So I understand what she's going through in that regard. So but she's probably got it on the skin. I'm not sure why that. What I have noticed, I'll give you this. I have noticed more women will get oxalate dumping through the skin than men.
That's
And
weird.
I have no idea. Why that happens.
I'm not
but
so
it
sure
does.
if it. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just saying that. They mostly get. They usually get like severe type rashes and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that some men won't get it, but it just seems that more anecdotally, more of the people that have approached me or that I've heard have been women than rather men. But I could be wrong. I mean, on other channels where there are, like there are thousands and thousands of other subscribers, and they basically reporting it could be the other way around. I could be completely wrong on this. But for my subscribers, well, it may be, and the reason for that is because I've got more male subscribers than female subscribers. So I'm getting more from them rather than the males. And that's based on the numbers, it seems disproportionate. It should be, if it was the same, it should be similar level, proportionality. It should be, I've got this percentage of subscribe, should be that percentage to be, if it's even. That's the only reason why I'm thinking maybe. But as I said, I could be completely wrong as well on that. So always those possibilities.
Ah, yes.
Fast and dangerous over long term. Excessive cortisol response. Is it suboptimal for muscle gains? Elevated cortisol can be a problem sometimes. Because if you're running, it's sort of the breakdown of tissue that can happen. But remember, the thing that normalizes cortisol levels is taurine.
Yep.
Yeah, does normalize it. So it will bring it back to baseline. It's the reason why we use it for people that have got difficulty sleeping at night in the evenings, to sort of normalize cortisol levels, increase GABA A, to achieve that. So,
I
I think it's also a regulation of the ions in the blood. So
Yep.
the ions in the blood is the key thing that it's regulating, and they, by having enough within the gradient within the actual blood of sodium is critical in influencing via the kidneys the response of the glands. So that's, I think, the most, so that's really what's really at play ultimately, in sort of normalizing the cortisol excretion rate. So it's probably through that mechanism, and possibly there is another mechanism, but I can't remember it now, that it also affects I'm trying to remember now. It's something to do with norepinephrine, some way that it actually influences norepinephrine, then that has an effect on cortisol. Anyway, it's a few years back that I remember reading it. And I just can't remember it off the top of my head. I should go back and reread it to remember.
I'm giving you a reason to remember that.
Exactly, to explain it properly.
Yep. Yeah. No, but I'm asking you, Harry, because lately I've been trying to optimize a few things, and I always hear people talking about like the cortisol, like the stress, and I like training. I'm actually a bit stubborn because I'm very disciplined about it. Even if I'm not feeling out that great, I'll still go. But
yeah,
I've been thinking,
you've been eating plenty of meat and taking taurine, and trying to minimize to some extent your blue light exposure, and that has improved your sleep
pretty much.
So I'm going, I don't necessarily think, I still haven't convinced you to buy some blue blocking glasses, but anyway, we're working on that.
No. Yes.
I'm
actually sourcing a place to buy those.
Okay, you use the software to lower the blue light intensity on your monitor. Yep. I know you do that, but but you definitely want to bring it, because I think you'll actually improve your sleep even further by doing that. So it will make a difference, believe me. Most people don't.
I actually want them for when I go to the office as well, because I can't control the artificial lighting there. So major issue.
Sammy, if you're getting about a gram, half a gram to a gram, it should be more than sufficient to deal with the issue. So a couple of eggs, probably 3 eggs a day, is probably what most people, because there's some endogenous production, unless you've got specific genetics like me, most people with a couple of eggs, or with even, remember the foods, the meats, if you eat plenty of meat as well, you'll get enough choline as well to do the job. So, for the export. And remember also, you are releasing free fatty acids from the adipose. You are basically also getting energy via chylomicrons. The amount of VLDL production in your liver, that means fat production in your liver, to export out is reduced unless you're doing a lot of physical work. That's when triglycerides go up. When you're doing a lot of exercise, you need additional energy. But if you're just basically doing a standard carnivore diet and you sedentary, or you're basically just doing low, just walking, that level, low grade movements and exercise and whatever, your level of requirements to produce the export of triglycerides via VLDL is going to be reduced. So you're not going to require, your choline requirements actually go down on a carnivore diet. We get more than we need. It's just people that have got certain genetic SNPs like myself, or fixing an underlying problem, may want to take a short term, for 6 months, maybe a year to fix some issues, whether neurological issues or whatever, sort them out, and then basically just stick to the diet. The diet should be doing all the rest. It's just that basically you may need an intervention period and then you switch back to a normal diet. So that's the way of seeing it. That's a very rare, about, I think it's 2 to 4%, depending on who you talk to, of the population that has this conversion issue. So the rest of you guys can actually produce endogenous choline to some extent, and you get enough in your meat, plus you support the other primary methylation pathway. So don't really worry about it, I would say, Sammy, at all. And I think people in the Middle East don't tend to have that genetic SNP very much. So the likelihood of you having it is probably low. So I wouldn't really worry in that regard. So yeah, just focus on having a couple of eggs, and it'll all sort itself out down the track if you do have that sort of condition. Yes. Doesn't get me started on the vice president. Yes. We won't go there. I heard seed oils was used in ancient Egypt. Any thoughts? Yes, it was. Yes. The person who actually first heard about it, which was about, when was it? 11 years ago, it was Michael Eads, in one of his ancestral ones back there. I think it was Michael. Either was Michael Eads or Sally Fallon. I can't remember, to be really, it was one of the two. The lady from who's from the Western Aid Price Foundation.
Yep.
So it was either her that actually mentioned it. It was either Sally. It was either Mary. What was her name? I'm trying to think of her surname. She was the lady that actually collaborated with Sally Fallon, that has passed away now. She was an old lady, but a researcher at the Maryland research facilities. So she was well connected with the establishment type things, but she did research and realized, shit, seed oils are really bad for you. And so, that's when a lot of the funding was cut. So, yes. And that's when then she got together with Sally Fallon and developed the Western Aid Price Foundation. Mary Ings, that's it. Thanks, Alien Drone. Yeah, ENIG, Ings. Yep. And yep, yeah, they did. And so really, the ultimate diet that we're proposing nowadays, the plant-based diet with seed oils, is what exactly the ancient Egyptians used to use. And they used to get basically fatty liver, the men tits, and basically a lot of the women problems of reproduction problems and all that, especially, and they used to have a lot of health problems of that sort, plus cardiovascular disease, which was described, diabetes and cardiovascular disease which was described by their physicians.
Yep.
Where up until that point, around the world, there was very little cardiovascular disease, if any. It was only amongst the very super rich emperors and kings and stuff like that who were engaging the Randall cycle. But everybody else that was around, in Egypt, they were the exception, where they were using a lot of seed oils, very little animal food, and a lot of plant food back then. The Egyptians were well known for that, and they had abysmal teeth hygiene. as well. They were the ones that actually invented a lot of the actual the early dentistry technology, like false teeth and all sorts of things. So they were quite innovative, but they had to, because they were consuming so much kibble, like our modern society is. It was about 70% with seed oils, which is exactly what the sad diet is today, but on steroids is the difference. Where they're obviously they would have been engaging the Randall cycle at a much lower gradient, because still their society wasn't as productive as it is today. So where we can produce with cheap energy so much refined kibble to much higher levels, and that's why people are able to get excessively high levels of Randall cycle engagement, and that's why they are morbidly obese compared to the Egyptians that were just overweight rather than morbidly obese, because they still had physical activity and were still to some extent semi-undernourished. So already inappropriately, but they were still getting heart disease and all that even before refined sugar exists, because the only people that actually developed refined sugar were the Indians, and they were the only ones that actually had the much higher rates of diabetes back then, the wealthy in particular. So well described by a number of physicians, Indian physicians, and then also a number of Greek physicians that got the text after Alexander the Great, that is. They were able to get that information because they did go all the way to India. So they found out a bit this sort of stuff, but they still managed to bring back the sugar to Europe. Wonderful. It's got these side effects. No, we don't care. Just give us the enjoyment. Give us the dopamine hit.
Think wars were fought over this stuff.
Well, people can make money on dopamine hits.
Yep.
Remember that.
Back in my hometown, there's like sugarcane as far as the eye can see, just if you go out to the road.
Yeah, what Alien Drone just said there, the Egyptian mummies were found to have heart disease, abdominal obesity. Yep. Yeah, all this. Hypogamas. Yeah. And basically Cosmo Magazine, the Cosmo Magazine of the day. Yes, very much so, all these sort of things. And that is really what the state of affairs was. It was pretty bad. It's well recorded. And this is exactly the same. We've done that experiment. This is the exact same bullshit they want to put us on again. Because these nutritionists say, "Oh, we've never done this experiment. It's all new. We're innovating. We've people are just not doing it right." Huh? Let's go back to ancient Egypt. They did it right as well, apparently.
Yep.
What? Absolute nonsense. Well, it's easy. If you want to do a fat adaptation, you lower your protein down to about 20-odd%. You basically go high fat. And if you basically don't feel that fantastic, you're not fat adapted. It's really that simple. You're basically having difficulty oxidizing fat. Whether it's an enzymatic issue that you haven't adapted sufficiently enough, or whether it's a mitochondrial dysfunction issue, or what the underlying reasons, or multiple factors. Well, one way also to tell you whether you've got severe mitochondrial dysfunction is doing a 3-day fast and seeing, and if you're feeling really ratchet and you don't become insulin sensitive and you still have energy issues after that, that means you've got mitochondrial problems you need to fix before you can even consider, because you're in a glycolytic state. You've got problems at the mitochondrial level. So that's, a different kettle of fish. I've talked about it before, so I won't go into it again, but I will there is a future video coming to discuss some of those nuances. It won't be any sciencey. It'll just be a general discussion, just explaining this sort of stuff, so people have got a reference point and what things to do if you have that sort of stuff. There is some stuff that is under the cancer sort of stuff, the senolytics and other things there at the moment, but we do need, because a lot of these have a common origin, the causes of a lot of the modern diseases of civilization, as they're called. They've got the similar root cause, so we need to basically address some of these issues in that regard. And it may mean some people need to metabolic water, deuterium depleted water, and a few other things, strategies to sort those things out.
Harry, there's something I've been meaning to ask you, not to get in the way of everyone's question.
No, that's okay.
So I've been listening to a few podcasts that I found with Dr. Boros in them.
Yep.
And he has mentioned that like plant oils, like the ones extracted, so if they're extracted like cold pressed or traditionally extracted,
yeah, they're low in deuterium.
They're low in deuterium. So what is high is the industrial seed oils, because they're hydrogenated.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's the industrial. The only problems with the plant oils, even though they are cold pressed, like for instance, I'll give you an example. The cold pressed olive oil is 130 parts per million, which is the cutoff point. So it's much lower than the industrial seed oils that are 255 parts per million. But there is the other element to it, aldehydes and oxidative primary and secondary products. So is it optimal? No. Is it lowering deuterium compared to seed oils that are come through an industrial system? Definitely. But is it optimal? No. And that's how I view it. Sometimes people like that, academics like Boros and all that, they want to basically have less enemies in academia, and they become diplomatic to sort of keep some of the vegetarian community happy with, oh yes, you can use olive oil and you can use things like avocado oil and macadamia oil and stuff like that. But the reality is, I mean, down deep, he doesn't. He actually has. He eats more carnivorous diet. He actually consumes raw bacon in many cases, smoked raw bacon. He loves it, and he prefers bacon as his best source. Lard, which is bacon is actually one of the lowest deuterium food, yummy foods that you can actually eat. And so he's very much, you've probably heard him in some of his podcasts saying that, and that he enjoys that sort of stuff. But he has to be diplomatic to the others because he's part of that academic world, and that's why he. But the reality is, yes, plants, nuts, seeds, and all that do have lower deuterium. So the fats in let's say a walnut, the fats in seeds and stuff like that. But it also has a horrendous amount of anti-nutrients. So obviously the animal foods are going to be much lower in deuterium compared to the plant foods. But even the ones that are, some of these plants are around about 120 odd, which is similar to tallow. But there's a difference between tallow that has no anti-nutrients and something that has a lot of anti-nutrients that is going to cause a lot of other problems in your body. So yes, it's probably another reason why vegetarians that ate a whole food, a plant-based diet, they get all the anti-nutrients and a lot of the other deficiencies and whatever else, but they're also consuming stuff that is much lower in deuterium.
Yep.
So the vegetarians do much better than some of those fruitarians that are consuming much higher deuterium levels. So that's where you notice vegetarians doing better than vegans. So there's so many factors. There's as I said, it's not only it's the type of foods you're eating on a plant-based diet that also make differences between one or the other. But in the end of the day, glucose is glucose, no difference. So let's be quite clear about that. And the anti-nutrient composition of different plants is going to be widely different. So it's going to have different effects on the way it's going to affect your gut and your general health in other areas. And also in terms of anti-nutrient deficiency causing anti-nutrients as well that's another layer when it comes to plants. When you go to an animal-based diet, you eliminate all those concerns, all those issues, So, but yes, some people on some plants, they can get low deuterium sources of fat. That's true, so
Interesting.
yeah. So a lot of people, I think they go for things like macadamia nuts and stuff like that, especially in some of the vegans that know about the deuterium side of things. They tend to go for macadamia nuts and some of these ones that are less prone to oxidation problems. So that's the sort of approach they take.
Yeah.
And it's also depending on and in comparison to some other nuts, macadamia nuts, I think, have also got slightly less anti-nutrients. They still have anti-nutrients, but slightly less in comparison. They also have a lot of MUFA, which tends to be less problematic in terms of stability and rancidity and aldehydes and stuff like that. So for them, it's probably a better option. Yep. But the reality is, in nature, you would never have found so much macadamia availability. As well,
it's wholly unnatural. They also try things with like coconut oil and cacao fat as well. But it's like it would come practical.
And remember, in your adipose tissue, half of it is actually MUFA in there.
Yep.
So you can still engage the Randall cycle with sugar and MUFA fats. So you can still get fat, but you'll tend to create more adiposity in the subcutaneous rather than the viscera fat. So it's sort of healthier fat, but still fat that you can actually build up. And that's why vegetarians are still slightly, compared to SAD dieters, will do much better, because the SAD dieters will be using refined sugars and they'll be building up visceral fat at a much greater rate than subcutaneous fat, which most vegetarians tend to build up, So there's that difference as well. And that's the healthy user bias component of the type of adiposity that they're actually growing by engaging the Randall cycle. So that's sort of the slight differences there as well. There is all these nuances, and that's why people can say, oh, what about that? What about that? Yeah, I've just explained it. That's why there's all these little hormonal things and the different types of substrates that are coming in that are affecting those hormones differently and depositing that energy in different ways in the body. And then also genetics variations. There's another component we can't ignore as well. So yeah, it's yes. Analogies HD with the Roman Empire. Be very careful there, because I'm a very much well versed in Roman and Greek history. Yes, don't slip up there. The beast could give you a slapping.
And now that's another meme I can make.
Exactly. And let's not excite other people.
Yes, careful. Some people like
will
that.
be Russian century. Unlikely, HD. They have the whole deck. Just wary of China there. And they're stripping of the Siberian forest. Yep, Chinese basically are going to benefit from the Russian bear in the long run. That's really what's going to happen. And they've also got Russia is basically declining population-wise. Their birth rate is much going backwards. So I don't think it's going to be their century. Let's put it that way. What Putin has done is actually stabilized and slowed down the decline. That's what he's done. To forget about some of the social policies that he's enacted and some of the approaches, some of the repressive approaches, or whatever he's done. Yeah, we can all disagree with that. But in general, in terms of the management of the economy, and I would actually say central banker. She's a lady, I forget her name, but she's a very astute, one of the best central bankers in the world, I would say. She really understood this crisis was going to happen from way back. She de-dollarized the Russian economy. She basically shifted to buying more gold and getting underpinning the currency with gold, and also developing a lot of the institutional framework within the banking system to be able to function independently if required from the West. That is why the Russian banking system was able to avoid a collapse when the SWIFT and other mechanisms were denied to it, because it actually had redundancy and other ways of basically, and also she pushed Putin to basically have these currency relationships with other countries, like with India, and with and to trade in both ruble and the rupee, and also with China to trade with the actual ruble and the yuan. By doing that and actually setting up all the interbanking sort of connections and stuff like that was basically what really stabilized Russia. Actually has made them even wealthier. The crisis actually has made them far wealthier. Russia, basically, as I said, next year they'll be they're already up 120 billion, and that's through the increase in the value of the ruble. So that means the Europeans and many others have to give more of their currency to the Russians in order to buy rubles, in order to buy the oil and gas and all the other minerals and whatever else. So as a consequence, Russia is basically doing a bonanza in profits, so they are making shitloads of money. And next year it is believed they could be as high as their increase in the amount of the wealth that they actually will generate as their level of trade balance could be as high as 300 billion. So it's interesting what's happening. So basically these all these sanctions, these woke sanctions, have been sanctions on Europe and North America, and they've basically been to the benefit of Russia. The complete opposite what they were intended. It's just they didn't. And what happened? Really? Oh well, how can you misfire that badly? So yes, they really misfired severely, to say the least. Salad Boy just released a new short. Non-stick pans are bullshit. Okay.
Yeah, he's going to say that Teflon is bad. We all know that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I only use basically ceramic, glass, and stainless steel. That's all I use. I do not use any non-stick or whatever. And if you've got enough fat in the pan, it won't stick. I put butter down and then I throw my eggs. They taste much better as well.
Yeah, I still have 8 hours to go before I can eat.
I shouldn't make you hungry then.
It's fine. I've eaten so much today.
Look, there's a lot of compounds, chemical compounds that they put in a lot of these, even a lot of the actual surface. Like sometimes even these non-stick ceramic types, they I'm talking about whole ceramic, not these like ceramic surfaces. These ceramic surfaces, they put this chemical agent to bond it with steel, and then that can break up and that can release into the food. It's really bad, all that sort of modern stuff. We're talking about actual ceramic pots or ceramic structures that are done by clay, no chemicals, just traditional, based on that sort of stuff. Or glass, not going to get anything from glass pretty clear. Just have to be careful you don't break it. But you can actually get glass which is actually doesn't shatter easily, so it's much different, so you can do that as well. Plus you've also got your stainless steel stuff. Most of my stuff, pots and pans and all that, are all stainless steel. So, they just have a copper base for the heat. the heat
Yep.
distribution.
Yeah, that is very, very helpful.
Yeah. It's you gotta. Yeah, it is. They tend to be a bit more pricey, but they do the better job without
Yep.
the issues of any other sort of stuff getting into your food that shouldn't be there. But yeah. Add the Red Sea natural gas, Ogaden of Ethiopia and else in Somalia, several parts of potential ones, Port of Sudan, Mazawar, Asab, and Mogadishu. The implications are huge. Yes, they are. There's a lot of issues there. I know Chad has gone under, which was the first on. Mali was the next one that I talked about. There's a couple of others now that are teetering, that are asking for support. But they're not openly asking. Some of them, they're very quiet about it. So yeah, some of the actual Horn of Africa countries there are getting some support from some of the Gulf cooperation countries in the Gulf. So there's a bit of shipments from there, some support from there that's coming, some financial support as well. I think the UAE, United Arab Emirates, are also helping out a bit, some of these countries. They're also definitely trying to help Egypt as well, because Egypt is the big bread basket sort of thing, or the big one that actually imports a lot from, remember I did all those videos and showing their big imports. So they're in a very difficult spot as well. So they have to go into the open market. And I think United Arab Emirates is sort of, I've heard on the grapevine, it's not official, but heard on the grapevine, they are giving them some support, and also currency support and monetary support through their central bank as well. So there's a bit of that sort of, that's why it's not so visible for people to see, but there's a bit of support that's coming through there to provide stability for that part. Also, increasing the exports of their natural gas and stuff like that is helping Egypt as well, because that's giving them some hard currency to be able to go out there in the markets and all that. So that's helping a lot. So, they're doing better like that. It's a mixed bag. But as I said, at the moment, we're not in that intensity. We've got a supply chain issues at the moment, but it hasn't intensified. Towards the end of the year, things are going to really intensify, because that's when a lot of contracts are up for renewal and the prices are going to go through the roof for a lot of these things. That's when we're going to see, a lot of global economic, it'll vary. Let's put it this way. How much, I'm not going to say there's going to be a global implosion or anything like that. What it will mean is some countries, will shrink in terms of GDP quite a bit. Others just slightly. Others very little. It'll depend and vary from country to country. But Europe's going to be a real disaster area. I don't know how Europe is going to cope and all that. And I can see the desperation. You're seeing constantly the European leaders going to the Ukraine or Russia, basically behind the scenes begging for this war to stop. That's what really is happening. They are begging for this war to stop, to basically, and even they're putting a pressure. That's why even the Americans now you've noticed recently, they've shifted their tune a bit, be more receptive to, let's get a deal. Even the head of NATO, who's a complete twat, but anyway, he basically, the secretary, he basically is trying to encourage them. But I'm going, weren't you the one that actually was sort of championing them, with the Americans? Let's go in there and, really ramp it up. And now you're going in there and tell them, no, I'll just accept some sort of agreement with Putin. I'm going, what? You just basically sold them down the tube. You just put them out there as cannon fodder to have their whole society destroyed, and now you're basically telling them to basically, surrender part of their territory after they've been fighting like mad to try and keep it. Bloody crazy. with allies like that. Who needs enemies? They'll do more damage to your country than Are you following Alex Epstein on energy? You never heard of him. He has a lot of interesting podcasts. Yes. Okay. I've never heard of the guy. Have you heard of this guy, Alex Epstein? Or nope? Can you? Oh, anyway, I'll Google, try and find him. I tend to basically, when it comes to a lot of it's primarily Europe, Greece, geopoliticians, some in Australasia. There's not many here. Most of them are basically, even though I'm an Australian, most of them are thick as two bricks. You got no idea. There's a couple of them that have got some good ideas, but not many. And in America, they're so partisan, so politically, they're not honest in their analysis. In many cases, they're very much skewed by a lot of bias. Maybe this guy's a bit, maybe he's a bit more controversial, less biased, and more willing to go under you could say, I don't know. I'll look him up, Alien Drone. Thanks for letting me know. I'll definitely look him up because it'll be interesting. Let me just find where you have to go all the way back. Okay, there you go. Copy and paste. I suspect it's this guy. Let me know if it's this guy or not. So I just put the Wikipedia thing. Whether it's this guy or not, just let me know. Alien Drone, because Richard's here as well. G'day, Richard. Vivid mouse for the rest of yous. I can't say that out loud. I could get banned off YouTube. Shelley, you're trying to cause me problems. You're as bad as Ted. Turns up basically. Upsets the YouTubia censor board. God, you and Ted are just as bad as each other. Let alone that bald man. God, wonder where he is today. I did jump on his earlier thing. He's put up a couple of videos, but K is back. He's got his channel back up and running with 3 videos. The rest of the stuff is all on, Odyssey at the moment. And he's going to be making some new content and all that. I'm going to have a bit of a chat with him. I think that there's a few other things that he could do that will not be risky for him to be able to do. A bit like, Tony Heller does some stuff. There is certain approaches you can do it and certain ways of actually, linking to that may also. Okay. Oh, yes.
Yep, that's the guy.
Yeah, that's the guy. Okay. I'll look him up and check him out. Thanks for bringing him to my attention. So, look, it's always good to, check out other people and just find out what they're actually saying and stuff like that, because that's important. Strong and Lean 40, how are you, Harry? What can cause short of breath on carnivore after a meal when you take full satisfying? You can't take a full satisfying inhale. That's a bit a sort of weird. It is related to lungs in order. Are you eating too lean meats and not getting enough? That's a really. The only other thing that I can think of is an anaphylaxis type thing that could be affecting it. I've never heard of this, to be honest. I've never.
I don't know if it's like some sort of like digestive distress is messing with your diaphragm somehow.
There could be that as well. There's a lot of things that could be, but to be honest, I've never heard of this sort of condition where somebody eats a steak and then basically has a shortness of breath. That's just not normal in that regard. I'm sort of thinking that if you're eating too lean animal foods, you may not be getting over time fat soluble vitamins, which are very important for the functioning of the lungs due to matrix. You could have an overexpression due to anaphylaxis. Let's say there are some people that have got like tick, the tick where they have been bitten by a tick or certain types of insects. They end up with an anaphylaxis to meat. They can consume like fish, protein and other things like that, and chicken, I think they can. Eggs are fine. It's just red meat is a problem. And there are programs in a number of countries. There's one in Australia as well, where you can actually have like a desensitization. You go through a desensitization process where you can actually bring the sensitivity to these proteins down. The other thing is taurine plays a big role in the lungs. It also plays a big role in the digestion. So if you're actually having foreign proteins that are not properly digested, that also makes you more susceptible as well. So improving stomach functioning with taurine, sometimes if you're not on blood pressure meds or lithium, because I have made a video on that, then consuming like 4 or 6 grams of taurine and getting to the state where your acidic levels are good enough to basically close the sphincter on top and actually digest properly and denature, because that's what when you've got high acidity, a low pH, you will denature all the proteins into basic amino acids, and then you'll absorb those amino acids through the middle part of your intestine primarily. And you should technically not have any foreign proteins that cause any reactivity. If you've got a tick problem, which is causing some level of inflammation, that tick can actually increase matrix metalloproteinases in the body. And what it can do is, because of that anaphylactic effect, it can actually increase then the breakdown of lung sort of surfactants and things like that, and other tissue within the lungs. The other thing that also could be, you may have certain genetics. My sister had asthma for 25 years. Both my sisters, they were on a vegetarian type diet, and there is a genetic SNP which I have, she has, and all that. The good thing is, I used to, even though I was eating seed oils and all that, I was consuming enough meat to get enough to pass by. I did have touch asthma, bronchitis, so it was very mild. But once I actually ate more animal foods, I eliminated that completely. It's the choline. So choline is very important. If it's overused for methylation, you won't get enough for lung surfactant. Lung surfactant is really important. So you need choline and palmitate, which is one of the saturated fats, which actually creates this lung surfactant for gas exchanges. So if you don't get enough of that, and for some reason you're not getting enough of that, that can be a problem as well. I can't think of any other thing. So it's either a genetic, where you need more choline in your diet, or it's basically, it sounds to me more like an anaphylaxis of some sort, where it's causing some sort of issues and all that. Now, obviously, denaturing foreign proteins into basically amino acids is a good way to improve digestion. It is a good way for all digestion to be headed that way. But yeah, that's off the top of my head what I could actually think about, just knowing from other anecdotes and conditions that people have had. But but actually having that sort of shortness of breath from eating, and I don't know exactly what foods you're eating. I suspect like most carnivores probably eating steaks and stuff like that. Yeah, that is not normal. That's not supposed to happen. We don't see it in ancestral people. We've been hunting and hunting for a very long time. So yeah, it's yeah. So I would say it's those two. Obviously, increasing choline and seeing whether that rectifies it would tell me immediately that it was a lung surfactant issue that hasn't been addressed properly and has just been made more problematic, because animal foods do actually also tend to require slightly more choline, but they do have choline. But if you've got a synthesis problem, you may require a bit more. So that could be an issue, because I know that my sisters had structural asthma and these sort of slight mild breathing issues as well, and they were related to lung surfactant. But I don't know whether it's a lack of sufficient choline in the diet because of genetics, or the other side of the coin, this sort of anaphylaxis type issue. So it's one of the two. You need to experiment and try and work out which one it is. You eat more eggs, or take a choline supplement if you react to eggs poorly. And if it actually rectifies it, then it's the lung surfactant way. I'm tending to think that it's more likely an anaphylaxis thing with the red meat due to ticks and stuff like that. I don't know where you live and all that, and you may have to go and do a test to find out whether it is that or not. Those are the two prime possibilities. So I hope that helped you. And that's me extrapolating. It's not really that any sort of research that I can point my finger at at. Okay. Possibly.
Yeah, which is the tick thing.
Yeah. Possibly. Somebody could have that.
Mm-hmm.
That's another possibility. But remember, yeah. It's strange that it didn't manifest in it earlier. But anyway. Yeah. But I didn't think of that. I've heard of it, but I didn't think of that. But possibility. Or the T button. Anyway, we are over 3 hours. We are.
Wow.
So I'm about to pull the pin in this situation. Any other questions that I wasn't able to answer, I do apologize to those people. You'll have to come back to the other live stream if you're still awake. If you're not, well, is there any? Anyway, I can't see any major question there. That rest of it's a lot of comments about a lot of different things that people are putting up. But anyway, it's been good to be back on the live stream. So I'm doing a fortnight thing now. So I'm actually taking some time, enjoying some of my own weekends, because I haven't had a weekend. I was basically just burning the candle at both ends. I think, Joe's there as well. Finally got to catch up. You're live. Oops. Anyway, there's Carrie there. My mother is reluctant to eat most animal foods, but enjoys eating salmon with butter. Any concerns eating salmon every day? Mostly farm raised, since wild is rarely available. It's probably getting enough fat soluble vitamins from the butter, which is good. It's probably too lean. Long term, it's probably not a good idea in that regard. Yeah, try and encourage her to try a few other animal foods. You know, I mean, there is, there's scallops, there's other things in the seafood family. There's octopus, there's squid, there's all these other things that are very nice and tasty and stuff like that. And they've got a whole lot of different nutrient profiles. Squid is really good. It's very high in cholesterol. So if you're trying to basically, people are, I remember one lady, she was pregnant, she had an anaphylaxis to meat and stuff like that. So squid was the way to go. It was able to get a lot of nutrients. It's packed with nutrients and a lot of cholesterol, good for the baby. So there's always options for all these sort of things for people that can use in that regard. So, try and vary. There's a look at a lot of different other animal foods that are out there that are options that you could basically use. So don't. I know a lot of in the carnivore community tend to be steak, beef steak, that sort of stuff. There are plenty of options. There's pork, there's lamb, there's different types of, poultry of different sorts. There's a whole variety of seafood out there. There's a lot of variations, and there's nothing wrong with mixing it up a bit. It creates variety, and it also provides additional diverse nutrient profiles that sometimes people could potentially miss out, especially if they're just consuming a diet high in DHA. Also, is probably not a good idea constantly eating, because it can actually interfere with some blood clotting factors and stuff like that and all that. So it's not something you want to be consuming massively amounts of, so she needs to vary her diet with a couple of other animal foods. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to leave it at that. And I'll give the last comment to Lukey. Luke, see us out, mate.
So yeah, everyone just keep fighting the good fight, sharing around the good information, taking care of our friends and family, and that's all I can say for today, I guess.
Okay, thanks, Lukey, and see you, everyone. And the other live stream will be in 4 hours' time from now. So whoever's still awake, I'll see you then. Whoever isn't, they can watch it. They can watch it tomorrow. I will be taking a flex day tomorrow, so I'll be at home all day. So I've got a day off, and so in the mornings I'll probably make a video or two, and they'll get released this week. I'll try and see if I can make more. If I get lucky, you may get lucky. And then I'm going to go out and do some shopping with Hello Kitty, and I have no idea what time we're going to come back after that. So she's taken the day off as well. I go, you didn't call work. Are you spying on me or something? He said, no, because I had the previous week when she was at work. So, but I'd actually, because my end of the month period finished, and I'd actually accumulated. I just nearly, because I was close to the limit, and so now if I don't take, it's the beginning of, because it's in the middle of the month, it sort of falls. It's about the 20. What was the end of the month? 20 on Wednesday was there actually Wednesday. So Thursday was the new month period, because we don't do it like the first right through. It says like in the middle, whatever, sort of like a 4-week thing. So it falls in different times of the month. When we have to put our timesheets on the system. And I was looking at, I'm going, I've got too much. So I said, and I knew that I'd end up with basically 3 days, and I'm going, no, I'm going to take, because otherwise, if I get close to the end of the month, it'll be very hard, because if we've got too many things, trying to get,
Yep.
it becomes a bit of a problem. I mean, my manager will allow me to carry it over. Don't get that, but I don't like it accumulate. I do like enjoying taking it, because otherwise you're just working, and building up time. So I said, no, I'll take one now. I'll take one in the middle of the month, and then one at the end of the month day, because I accumulate quite a few hours. I usually tend to work, 9 or 10 hours a day. So, yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, I sometimes have to force myself. I need to go home, so,
Yeah.
so as I said, I do like my work, so don't get me wrong. But, and I do like things to get sorted, done, and fixed and up to date, so I'm a bit of a stickler in that efficiency and stuff like that. And so, but it ends up accumulating too much. So what I'm going to do is, when I get back after a long shopping expedition, which usually is when I go out with Kitty, she's, why don't we go to that store as well and take a look? Okay, let's go. So I end up on a long, look, we tend to joke and, chat with each other. So it's good company in that regard. She's a pretty good person. So yeah. And pretty much that's about it, guys. I'm out of here. See yous, because need to be elsewhere shortly. Anyway,
Stay
bye.
well, everyone.